Silent Hill 2 is the pinnacle to some when it comes to what a genuine good horror game is. Without fail, if you ask a person what their favorite spooky experience from the early 2000s would be, Silent Hill 2 will for sure be mentioned at least once or twice. It's no surprise so many companies and people even to this day are making games heavily inspired by this title alone, with characters from 2 still making appearances in Konami properties like Bomberman. Silent Hill 2 is a good example of something that has reached cult status, sitting next to the greats like RE4, Majora's Mask, Planet, I'm just fucking with you. Yeah, nah. So it's probably a surprise to some, as I mentioned the Silent Hill series in videos before, I've actually never played anything besides Silent Hill 4 in Homecoming, meaning my tight SA2 virginity is still intact. I think the reason why I've taken so long to try out Silent Hill 2 comes from the fact I know it's not going to live up to the hype that I've created in my mind. Let it be known, I actually somehow managed to have little to nothing spoiled for me, besides very few things in the grand scheme that aren't that spoiler heavy. Like, yeah, I know about the nurses in Pyramid Head. Who doesn't at this point? Because of this, I've been able to let my mind run wild on what could possibly be in that town. What horrors and spooks and nightmares await me when I decide to take the plunge. With so many expectations, I never acted on it because I was worried I would hate Silent Hill 2 for something that's not even its fault. But that all changed when finally we got a remake that's actually good. I felt because this would be pretty new to me and I didn't have all these years of hype built up, it could be a good way to finally break that chain and step foot into what Silent Hill could finally offer with a new coat of paint. Let it be known though, I will be playing both the remake and original on the fact that technically this remake is more like a reimagining, as some scenes happen differently or are removed entirely. This is kind of like how the FF7 remake is to the original title on the PS1, so I can say that playing both will still give you very different experiences even if it's the same game in most ways. And I also think it would be really cool to come at the original after playing the remake and view it from that perspective, but the majority of this will be about the remake, so just keep that in mind. So without further ado, I want to welcome you to the 4th video for 61 Days of Spook, as we journey into what is seen as the be-all end-all of horror. Welcome to my Silent Hill 2 retrospective. Here we are in Tokyo, where we can see the gigantic skyscraper towering above everything else, and inside on the 42nd floor is where a team of devs came together to form Silent Hill 2, taking around 2 years to create such a classic that is fondly gushed about online from many YouTubers like me is impressive, with 3 people being portrayed as the reason why the sequel reached highs no one thought possible, with them being Masahiro Ito, Akira Yamaoka, and Hiroyuki Owaku. These 3 devs are cited to be the success for the project, with Ito being the game's art director and responsible for making the iconic designs of the hell our protagonist James comes face to face with. It's not a reach to see why these designs are still gushed about to this day, and how almost every game tries to have their own Pyramid Head in some form. I really like the idea that these monsters aren't just made to be scary threats you come across, as each detail and choice for how they look and act flows naturally to what they represent to the overarching story that James faces. This is why people get so pissed to see Pyramid Head in something that isn't Silent Hill 2, because it makes absolutely no sense why he's here. The movies and Homecoming are usually brought up when it comes to this weird inclusion. Sadly, Pyramid Head seems to just be used as the Punisher monster for anyone who holds any guilt. So even that 5-year-old who feels bad for shoplifting, yeah, guess who's coming for you, buddy? I mean, I get it, he's popular, so why not milk him in anything you can possibly think of? However, when you do that, you run the risk of losing the original intent behind the monster. Now let's talk about some of the big inspirations Ito said that inspired his work, as they came from the artists Francis Bacon, Kazuo Umezu, and Hideshi Hino, all of them sharing pretty common themes of horror. But in my personal opinion, I really find the works of Francis Bacon to be pretty close to that Silent Hill look, as his paintings consist of deformed human shapes and distorted imagery with skin or faces being stretched or manipulated, really matching a lot of the areas and creatures seen in the Silent Hill series. Akira Yamaoka was behind some of the greatest horror tracks to ever grace your ears. It would be an understatement to say that the OST for the series, let alone just Silent Hill 2, hasn't inspired many people to make similar sounds to it or sample it in unique ways, like in one instance, Sewer Slut's Lollybox song sampling the track Day of Night. or hell, even me using voice clips from it in something I made.
I see that town.
I have seen comments being upset that a lot of Silent Hill's music uses samples to make some of the iconic synths and pads, but I think to discredit the hard work these tracks bring to the atmosphere because a sample or two were used is pretty unfair. The majority of anything you hear is probably built from a sample, plus it does take skill to form something like this and turn it into this. And hey, I mean, if Silent Hill 4 can use track 33, sample 2 and 3 on the Ecstatic Goldmine, and also have Britney Spears use the same sample in one of her songs, this just proves these go fucking hard. And he's still making the OST for the series to this day. So when you have a company like Konami that is quick to remove you for any reason and you're still there having the same job that you've had this whole time, you know your shit slaps. Now, I love how he stated before in the making of Silent Hill 2 that his style isn't derived from movies or other media, but from what he wants to make, with the biggest goal for him is that whoever hears it will feel something from it. Finally, we have Hiroyuki Owaku. After the release of Silent Hill 1, Toyama ended up leaving Konami to do his own thing, so he didn't have any involvement with the story for the sequel. Nowadays, he's responsible for titles like Slitterhead and Gravity Rush 2, so the reins were given to Owaku to make sure the Silent Hill 2 story landed strong, as the central team would make drafts of what they wanted for the plot, with his job being to form an actual script from the ideas the team suggested and then have it be pushed back for them to finalize. So it's safe to say without these three coming together to mix and mash their creative ideas into one and leading the team through it all, we wouldn't have the horror title we have today. But I also want to bring this up, that even if these guys are the usual go-to for the greatness Silent Hill 2 is known for, without the team backing them and working together, these three couldn't have done it alone. Now, America would finally get their first look at the new upcoming announcement of Silent Hill 2 during E3 in 2001, where they had all the devs showcasing the game, and from what we can see, you can tell some assets were still early in development, like the item screen, having a more Resident Evil look to it than what we got in the final game. The demo features an early version of Brookhaven Hospital, where you can actually find this map still inside of the game's code. However, it does have a few things missing, like enemies and music. During this time as well, we got a couple of trial discs to play that were demos, with some of these being sold on eBay for high prices. When it came to advertising the game, America did its usual commercials and whatnot, while Japan had this poster that was considered too provocative, so it was removed, but given out as a pre-order bonus if you did get the game early. Finally, Europe, holy crap did they go all out. They decided to have an event called Silent Hill Live, where they brought out Akihiro, Sato, and Yamaoka. They got 100 game journalists to come and left them stranded in some random ass field till a bunch of women dressed as nurses in fake military trucks showed up and pretended to kidnap them. They went as far to put masks over their faces to blind them so they wouldn't know where they're going and forced them all to take a red pill. And this was all done in the summer heat, by the way, so a lot of people were sweating badly. Whenever they got the reporters to their destination, they then started to intimidate them with barking dogs just to be brought inside a mansion with fake bodies dangling from above. This is when everyone was finally shown Silent Hill 2. After the showcase, some girl saying she was Maria made them play a game where they explored a room that had fake blood inside the sinks and loud noises to confuse and overwhelm the journalist. And when all that was said and done, everyone went outside and ended the day with a paintball fight. Footage for this is super rare to the point I only found 2 videos and had to rip them using a Flash Player extension. Overall, it's crazy to see these random ass events done for games, as nowadays your best outcome for a pre-release event is a showcase on YouTube. Thankfully, gamers wouldn't have to wait long for the release as September 24, 2001 would be when everyone could finally get their hands on the game in America, with it coming out first before everywhere else. However, though, if you're aware, this wasn't long after a tragic event.
Just in, you were looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. The CNN Center right now is just beginning to work on this story, obviously calling our...
Now, if you were old enough to have the power to think for yourself at the time this occurred, it's probably remembered for how much this single event threw everything out of whack. Songs, movies, certain games, all were either being delayed, changed, or outright not released. Tension in the world was high as no one knew if more attacks were on their way. In a single day, America was flipped upside down. It's easy to look back on this event as something that occurred and memed about to death, but man, was this moment in history really something unexpected, and the shift in America's morale from this event is still somewhat noticed to this day. Now, why am I bringing up these attacks that occurred? Well, it's because Silent Hill 2 released just 13 days after the tragic terrorist attacks on the Twin Towers. The connection I'm trying to make here is that I find it quite interesting how Silent Hill 2 is a game about dealing with inner trauma and the darkness of reality. Somehow, it got released in one of America's darkest moments in the 21st century. So you would assume the last thing anyone wanted after witnessing what happened would be to play a game that deals with the heavy subjects and ideas of isolation, despair, guilt, and trauma. But despite the heavy themes and soul-crushing moods Silent Hill 2 brings, people seem to love it for that very reason, as many found an escape in the horror-ridden universe from the real events horrifying a whole nation. And I find that really intriguing. Despite all the hardships going on, a title that is designed to solely push the ideas of hardships onto you brought many people a new profound love for decades. Silent Hill 2 upon release was praised for how real and breathtaking everything came across as, at least in America. In Japan, it actually sold pretty bad at first, and people were very open to the dislike they had for it. But for us Freedom Eagle owners, seeing the jump from this to this helped make the world feel more alive. When Silent Hill 1 was being developed, the idea the devs had was to build scary places and have the story follow after, while in 2's case, they already knew what they were wanting the world to look like, making it easier to weave a story into it that wasn't just spooky, but heart-wrenching and immersive. Look no further than the first place we see James at, the bathroom. This map was the first area brought to life and ended up being the poster child for what the other areas needed to match. The intention for the world design was to bring a feeling known as simultaneous repulsion. This is the concept where you are attracted but repulsed by whatever you're viewing at the same time. Tsunoyama was the person in charge for the backgrounds and textures for the maps, going so far to go out and get real pictures of whatever he could find to help build the vision he was going for. Whenever I venture through these maps, I can really see that idea on full display. I always have a sense to explore them and see what's inside hiding, as these places feel familiar to the player from hotel rooms, bathrooms, and hospital hallways. But then it pulls that familiarity out from the player's feet and fills these spaces with brown rust, dried darkened blood, death, and well, more death. Mix the art direction with the fixed camera angles, this allowed the devs to really pinpoint out a certain look, since unlike in a 3D game, where I can move the camera all around, meaning you need to make sure every nook and cranny I can pinpoint looks good. In this, the camera being stuck here means only the viewed area needs to be visually outstanding. Even someone whose first experience with Silent Hill 2 is the remake, there's a charm in the PS2 version with these rundown areas that seem to get lost when remade. That's not to say the remake doesn't capture the original intent with these levels, I just felt the dark and disturbed areas soon blended together more than I saw in the original. At times when going through the apartments, I kept thinking I was in the hospital hallway and vice versa, and everything seems a bit more shiny in the remake. Maybe nitpicky, but the original has a more dark and dingy artistic appearance compared to Silent Hill 2 on PS5. Personally, I really do think the limitations of the PS2 help the art direction stand out way more, but the true reason Silent Hill 2 has such an otherworldly and dreamlike feel to it comes down to the graininess that's overlaid on top of everything. If you ever get to play Silent Hill 2 on a CRT, it's how you will truly understand what I'm talking about. Whenever that filter is removed, the world comes across as flat, but that subtle touch brings out the true essence of Silent Hill 2. And I'm even sure some of you didn't even know this was a filter being added to the game till just now. Compare that to most indie horror devs who love putting static or VHS filters on the screen, to the point it ends up being noticeable right away, while more often than not it becomes a hindrance to the overall experience, as more than likely all I can ever say is, I can't see shit! But Konami's team made sure to have their cake and eat it as well, finding that sweet spot to not have it come off as overbearing. The PS5 version decided to avoid using any filters to give the game a more sleek and clean look, and even though I'll be the first one to admit that the remake looks breathtaking and downright stunning, I feel something was lost in the transition. Just comparing the intro of walking to the graveyard between the original and the remake, the 2024 version comes off as a more calm and somber walk as it slowly starts to build tension. Now this walk is really nice, I'm not gonna lie. I just can't say I ever really felt isolated or lonely during this. Comparing this to the OG Silent Hill 2, that feeling hits you the instant you go down the stairs. It was a really smart idea from the devs to force the camera to be locked in front of James, blocking any view of what's up ahead, getting the player's mind to wonder, with thoughts on where the path leads, or at worst, is there anything up the trail I can't see waiting? Slowly, any idea of turning back the way you came starts being something you consider no longer in the realm of possibility anymore. This scene alone single-handedly captures what Silent Hill wants the player to experience for the rest of the game. And it's still funny to me, as iconic as this moment is, the dev team saw it as a risk to make the intro walk go on for as long as it does, because this could have easily turned the player off, as all you can see is fog surrounding you and technically nothing really is happening, which I feel was lost hard on the remake's opening trail, as I don't really feel isolated during this at all. If anything, like I said, it's more calming, but the suspense is still there thanks to the sounds and music once you get a bit down the trail. But you can tell this is heavily relying on your past memories to bring that sense of isolation and foreboding feeling. Look, without remembering how the PS2 game is supposed to make you feel, can you really tell me this and this give these same implications? Now, it's no surprise how huge Silent Hill 2 was, and how bad people were begging for a remake or even a HD remaster. So in hindsight, the fact there even is a remake is a no-brainer. So why did it take 20 years for the new version to be a thing? Well, let's go into that. You see, as time went on, Konami decided to remaster 2 and 3 for an HD collection on the PS3. I don't think I need to really go into this part all that much, but Comic Sans signs and horrible lighting, and the fog, the central artistic gimmick, not working properly, I think it tells you why this failed so hard. Apparently, the reason 2 in particular was so bad in this port is because Konami just didn't have the finalized source code anymore. This is why Studio Hijinks was given an incomplete build of the final release. Now, from what people have gathered, the unfinished source code was still pretty close to the final one. The problem is Konami decided to hire a team that wasn't experienced enough at this point in time to handle a project like this. You see, Hijinks basically made shovelware or phone games. This would have been the first time doing something on a scale as big as this. So with Konami cheaping out and then providing an unfinished source code, I can at least say these remasters are beatable, so props for that. This is just another example of Konami being Konami. After the failure of these ports, fans were left with awful new games and some being alright. During this time, you would get rumors of a remake for 2 here and there, but nothing ever happened. Well, fast forward, and a horror title called Layers of Fear was shown, a 2016 horror experience from the dev team known as Blooper. Layers of Fear, when first showcased, was something people were excited for, as the visuals and atmosphere really were intriguing. But looking back on it now, the reliance on jump scares and horrible writing at times made a lot of people really not like this developer. I mean, looking at their catalog before Layers of Fear, we had hits like History Egypt or Basement Crawl. So Layers of Fear was a pretty big project for them. After though, they continued to make horror games, and Observer was one of the few that seemed to be loved, with even Layers of Fear 2 getting a sequel, and that was hated, unless you were IGN, who gave it a 9 out of 10. The Blair Witch game, which is straight garbage and relied on a movie that hasn't been relevant since the joke Robot Chicken did with it. And then we have Medium, which I like, and I did plan at first to review it for 61 Days of Spook, but man, the ending fucking blows, so that kind of made me not want to replay it. So with the track record of mediocre horror titles, you wonder how they were selected for Silent Hill 2 Remake. Now, originally before the dev team was picked to create the remake, Konami was trying to find a dev team to bring the idea to life. With Hexadrive being passionate and learning there's a chance they could work on the remake, they made a mock-up to show Konami with the hopes they would get picked. While only 20 seconds of footage have ever been released, Konami did actually like this mock-up, but they weren't chosen. Instead, Hexadrive ended up working on Silent Hill: The Short Message, which is another mixed release to add to the series. They instead decided to go with Blooper, which part of me feels it was because they were a cheap option, since comparing the track record they had, but considering the one thing Blooper always nailed is the atmosphere, I feel they would have been a high pick for that reason alone. As far as I can gather, the creation for the remake began a bit before the pandemic, as the new VA for James said they were contacted around said time to do voice work. Funny enough, when told about the opportunity to work on this, he wasn't even aware of what they were voice acting in, as he thought it was some Arctic horror experience. But the first time we, the people, were finally made aware this was a real thing being worked on was thanks to a faithful PlayStation showcase, where the Silent Hill 2 remake trailer was revealed, October 19, 2022. Now, to say the hype around this trailer wasn't overwhelming would be a lie. People on forums, Reddit, Twitter, your local Denny's were raving about this finally being a thing. We did have some people a bit worried on Blooper leading the development, but the discourse around it was still positive since again, it's Silent Hill 2. I mean, come on, be real guys, how can you fuck that up? Oh boy. It wasn't until the state of play that occurred in 2024 we finally got shown new information regarding the remake, as we can clearly see James has had some changes from the previous version. Looking a bit older and skinnier on his face, lighting and overall atmosphere looked better than what was shown previously. Now this trailer in particular had a sneak peek at the combat, and it caused some worry. And then we got a real look at how James would be fighting off these nightmare creatures in the form of a dedicated combat trailer, and it was basically your everyday third-person action game. The backlash for this was massive, to the point even Blooper themselves hate this trailer. Watching James shoot down and go toe-to-toe with these monsters as if they were just a roadblock and not an actual threat, it was pretty easy to find people saying how rough and awful the animations looked, and the hype soon turned to worry, as it was clear to see the original vibe Silent Hill 2 had going for it now was appearing to be a RE clone with a Silent Hill 2 skin attached. Even I saw this and went, bro, what the fuck, this ain't Silent Hill. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't think the combat looked bad. If anything, it seemed like a reasonable transition for evolving the original into a modern take. But this didn't feel like Silent Hill. You see, James was never designed to be a superhuman. While yes, James is fit and not weak by any means, but this is a bit overkill. Hell, in an interview with Luke Roberts, he says James isn't supposed to be an action hero and he's just a guy who's stuck in the hellhole we play through. So why is he going toe-to-toe with these nightmare spawns that are supposed to represent his biggest fears, as if he's attending a Walmart Black Friday and they're blocking his way to the OLED TVs? Like, how am I supposed to feel James as an everyday man when he's doing this to a nurse? Now, it wasn't long till we got another trailer that finally told us when we gamers could get our grubby Cheeto finger looking hands on it. Somehow people still weren't happy. Everyone was worried about Blooper being behind this. People said for a $70 game this looked like shit. I don't believe that. I think it looks really good. And the combat was still the RE feel we saw before. Thankfully, all it took was actual showcase of the game running for the mood to change. And yeah, this looked like a pretty competent remake. Even a lot of the comments started to change their perspective and defend Blooper's take on the remake. There was some rough parts still shown, like impacts from weapons not feeling meaty or satisfying, but with it still having 5 months from release, changes could still be made. But from what I could see myself, this looked like it was running on version 1.0, which is what comes on the PS5 disc if you decide to not update. Update 1.0 from what we've seen in the code is dated 6 months back before release, meaning this is either 1.0 footage or from before 1.0 was finished, but this is all speculation as no one really knows. As time passed with a few more trailers coming out, there was a whole event held for the release in Tokyo with a lot of exclusive merch. The hype really started growing more and more. And it wasn't long till the date was soon upon us as the remake was officially here. As someone who has played the remake before ever experiencing the OG 2001 version, I can say right now, this is a great game. While not perfect, trust me, Team Blooper blew this out of the water and truly showed the love they had for the series. To the point not only Silent Hill 2 is represented, but 1, 3, and 4 all get their love in some form or way. They even went as far as to expand areas that originally weren't previously accessible. The fact they went from mediocre releases to making a remake of a cult classic as this, I'll be real, I would have been stressed out of my fucking mind to be Team Blooper in a situation such as this. One of the biggest props I want to give to Blooper is being able to still keep the Silent Hill 2 spirit while making sure the game is modernized but in a good way. As after playing the OG version, boy are there some stuff that really makes it hard to go back to. But as said before, I do think that while Blooper does love the franchise dearly, I do believe there's some aspects they just didn't understand why they were the way they were. But for me to get to those points, why don't we finally start the actual game review part for the remake and original PS2 version and see what they have in store for us. One thing I'm kind of jealous about people who grew up with the original is what the impact from finally seeing this iconic scene in HD felt like. Because even as someone who again never played these games, the feeling this creates is enough to get me invested. The shot of James looking up at the mirror to cut to a view of the dirty bathroom with a faint bell chime, as he begins to monologue to himself about if Mary could really be here, with the darkness beginning to engulf the screen as the sound of a door opening lets the light pierce inside, giving us a view of the outside world. The wetness of the ground, the cloudy skies above, accompanied with the flowing of leaves and trash going by from the faint wind. Like I said before, if there's one thing Blooper knows how to create, it's graphically impressive worlds. The seamless flow from cutscene to gameplay just to let the player finally explore and take everything in. It's really charming indeed. Look, I know what I said before about the opening area losing the original intent, but I'm not going to sit here and say I hate the remake's rendition on the parking lot, as I think if anything it makes the player feel a bit safe before walking down the path to what is considered hell on earth. It's like a little quiet rest stop before what awaits. While OG Silent Hill 2 had your ass on guard just from walking out, now that we're finally getting to see James not have his emo moment in the mirror, I can gush about the model in all of his HD 4K glory. This, in my opinion, is the perfect upgrade to his original look. Going from this to this, I don't feel anything was lost on the transition. To me, this looks like what the dev team originally were trying to go for. I really can't find any fault on how James looks compared to the original. One little detail I really like is the fact James' bottom row of teeth aren't perfectly straight. And as someone whose bottom row of teeth myself are pretty much as straight as a femboy lover, it's really made me feel kinda represented in a way. This small detail helps sell James as not a model or hero, but just a normal dude who's coming here with his imperfections and flaws showcased to us, the player, to see. His new VA is Luke Roberts, and by far, I feel this role fits him very well. Not to say Guy Chi isn't a good VA for James, but man, does Luke nail the feeling of someone going through it every time he talks. His yelling and worries and anything between just feels so natural. I just can't get over how much his voice matches the remake version of James so well. But to go on a little tangent, I love how both of these guys got their role for James. Luke wasn't even sure what he was voice acting in just for it to be Silent Hill 2, with his audition tape, according to the devs, being one of the worst ones they received due to technical reasons. But because of his voice and acting, they knew they wanted him. So Guy Chi ended up going to director Jeremy Blaustein and asked if he could get a role. This man felt so bad for Guy, he helped him get the main character voice role just to learn Guy Chi had a shit ton of money and still wasn't broke.
You know, can you let me audition for like the main part? You know, I don't, you know, I can't remember if he said it in Japanese or English for some reason, but he said, you know, I don't have a job.
Huh?
You know, he said I don't have a job. Yeah, I'm out of work. He said, right?
Ugh.
Okay, so I auditioned him, and everybody up to that point had really sucked, and he just sucked.
Yeah.
So he kind of got the job. he kind of had this gloomy looking face, you know, and this gloomy manner. And when he said he was out of work, you know, and so he kind of fit the character, you know.
Yeah.
And we had to think about motion capture for that game too.
Yeah, and
he physically kind of looked the part and stuff. So
yeah.
Anyway, it turns out this guy was like a millionaire many times over.
That's what I was saying. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
He was a fucking millionaire.
Now in present time, he just posts about how much he hates the 5G towers and how they cause cancer and hates getting your children vaxxed. So honestly ironic, the guy who plays a character whose wife died from a horrible disease is strongly against medication for curing said horrible diseases. When we take the steps down after grabbing the map, it lets us finally begin our journey to the graveyard. While I have already made my opinion known about the walking section, I can't help but find enjoyment from just how amazing this looks. Hearing the wind whistle by from the trees, the sound of nature interrupting your footsteps that echo back to the world around you. This is still a nice way to reimagine the feeling you're supposed to feel, even though isolation isn't really what I would say I get from this walk. Maybe to some, being alone in nature with the faint fog around could be seen as isolating. But when this walk is a minute at most before finally reaching the graveyard, it's hard to again say that it ever has enough time to cook that thinking into you. But now that we're finally at the graveyard, we run into the next character whose name is Angela. Now for what my opinion on Angela is in the remake, I would have to say she's 100% better in this than the original. Mostly for the fact that I feel Angela fits her role look-wise way more than she did in the 2001 game. Going from a normal looking sweater to a turtleneck one with her whole neck now covered, having a way chubbier face, very bushy eyebrows, and the voice brings it all together to feeling like what she's dealing with really has affected her, not just in how she acts, but dresses and views herself. Sadly, when this design was shown off, people said she was too ugly and not hot enough, mostly because she was a bit chunkier. Now, to say that about her is beyond the worst thing you could ever bring up regarding her character, as Angela is someone who was essayed by her own father and brother. She was tortured and abused to the point she clearly is still affected by this from her mannerisms and the way she talks. Now, obviously, her face is a bit chunkier than her PS2 counterpart, but to me, I really think that's a cool detail, as it probably showed that she ate more to cope with the pain inflicted on her, as it's also seen a lot in SA victims to develop eating disorders that can range from eating more or barely eating at all. Following all that with the turtleneck sweater, to me this implies she wants to be covered up more to feel safer. It also could just be that it's cold and I'm looking into something not there, but I like to believe that's the intention for her design change, because she really had a pretty drastic redesign in the face area compared to what James got. And I mean, when your whole game is built on interpretations and theory guessing, why not go ahead and form my own? Now, for me, the main reason why I think the remake version of Angela is better is because, did you know, Angela in the OG Silent Hill 2 is supposed to be a minor at around the age of 16 or 17. So it makes it even more weirder that people were complaining Angela wasn't hot enough compared to her when she was a minor. But yeah, no, she's supposed to be 16 or 17, with her appearing older and intentionally having a 40-year-old woman voice act her to help push the idea that she's way older than she actually is. But this idea really falls flat when no one I've ever talked to realized this is what they were going for and just assumed she was a young adult. So thankfully, the remake makes her an actual adult this time, and I feel it worked way better for it. But our first encounter with Angela goes about as well as any random man pulling up on a female in the graveyard could possibly go. She tells James, however, to stay away from the town up ahead as something is wrong with it. He, however, lets her know even if it's dangerous, he's still going to go. And one thing you could pick up from this conversation between these two is just how much James really doesn't want to talk about his wife. The fact he pauses and then mentions he's looking for someone really helps sell to us that Mary's passing is still quite a hard pill to swallow. This can be seen later on when another character you meet tries to get James to talk about her and go into more detail, and he's just not having it. Now, I want to mention that the footage for this will be New Game Plus, as there's a few endings I want to go for to talk about. Those being one of the new remake endings added, the dog ending, Leave, and I guess Rebirth, since I thought it was originally one of the new exclusive endings, but it's not. However, I picked up the book here, so guess we're doing it. I will still be talking about the two new exclusive remake endings that were added to the PS5 version, but keep in mind, one of them I can't achieve because my first ending I got was Leave, which you need in water to get the key needed for the Stillness Ending. So that one I'm just gonna have to cover whenever we get to the endings, but I wasn't able to actually get it. Now, one cool little addition on New Game Plus is that you get a new weapon, being the chainsaw. This basically one-hits every common enemy you can come across. That being said though, I will not be using this as I want to have actual good combat footage instead of me one-shotting everything. But I'll be real, man, it's so cool to run up on Pyramid Head and swipe him with a freaking chainsaw, even though usually I just die after doing it. But I do like that you get this in both the original and the remake to help clear the rest of the endings. Now, because James needs to desperately get inside Silent Hill, he ends up stealing some guy's keys from a house he let himself into. But people with a keen eye will notice that there's a location that has been blocked off, which ends up being the original area that James runs into his first monster, with it now being a cool callback you can examine. But it's just one of the few moments where you can see the remake isn't afraid to do its own thing and change certain aspects. It's why I said as well, playing both versions will give you unique experiences. But this opens the floodgates for the ability to argue that these remakes aren't actually remaking the original game, which in return still makes the original not preserved in the way it truly needs to be for long-term enjoyment. But I reviewed Hey You Pikachu and said it was good. You think I have any good takes for that rabbit hole? Now, once we're actually in Silent Hill, I can say without a doubt, the fog is ever so oppressive, making whatever could be lurking in front of you hard to pinpoint. The wet puddles covering the streets and the eerie sounds of no one around. I really started to feel the isolation kick in at this very moment, as all you can do is wander the streets and check your map to make sure you're going in the right direction. And besides Angela, no one else has been around, even though notes can be seen randomly in buildings or even on the ground. But even then, it's still nothing but you and the random white walls blocking areas off from being accessed. And the fog. Now, I'm sure everyone knows this, but originally the fog was implemented in Silent Hill 1 because the draw distance on the PS1 is fucking awful. So by allowing everything to be covered up in this fog, it helped the game run better and could allow the devs to hide pop-ins. And it just so happened that fog fits pretty well with horror in abandoned towns. Plus, by obscuring what the player can see around them, it helps make what in hindsight isn't that big of a town come across as way bigger than you think. But using fog wasn't something that Konami was the first to implement into their games like some people like to spread around. In fact, things like Banjo and Kazooie, Glover, and Ocarina of Time had some use of fog to help hide the awful render distance. That way, whatever you were looking at didn't just pop in randomly into place. I just find it so interesting that a hardware limitation ended up forming an iconic horror trope that nerdy white guys like me always go on about when it be just a bit foggy that day. The fog, however, in the PS5 version was treated as if it was an actual character in the world with James. From what the devs showed, they really went all out to make the fog feel like something you couldn't escape, as they wanted to make it as dynamic as possible with it reacting to objects, corners, houses, and even wind. There's a part in the story where the wind starts to pick up, blowing the fog around you as it starts to suffocate you with its ominous presence. It's insane to me just how much love went into something that in the grand scheme of things is supposed to make it harder to see. But as James walks through the fog, he slowly sees what appears to be a person up ahead, with a tiny cutscene playing out before fading back into gameplay. When inspecting where the person stood, weird liquid paints the ground. James, remembering seeing it before from the plant shop, questions why there's more of it. Now, I want to say right now, the way the remake shows you a monster for the first time is pretty lame. Not only does the cutscene have it fade into it with the screen looking like it gets covered with fog, as well as fading out the same way, it looks pretty cheap, honestly. They do all this work just to clearly show us the monster standing there. Like, no one in their right mind looks at this and goes, yeah, that's a human. Yeah, let me go there and jerk him off. Dude, he's not even really obstructed by anything. Like, clearly I can tell that's not a human. The remake did such a good job of building the mystery of what made the goo from the florist building to then spoil it by clearly showing us the monster, to then have James go, oh, I wonder why there's more weird stains. Comparing to the original where the same scene plays out, but this time we see the blood. We then see it pan to the creature as it walks away, with it covered enough to make out the form of it, while in the remake, I can clearly see what that is. Now, when it comes to finally encountering said nightmare, I feel the remake shines strong in this approach. To me, it's a bit more natural for James to follow the stains inside a house since he's under the impression it's a person. Now, crawling into a random hole in the garage, is not so reasonable, but I still feel a bit more understanding than to go into an obvious construction site inside of a tunnel. I even think the way you get the radio is done better in the remake because the monster is quite a bit away from you, so it's easier to see why James wouldn't have noticed it. Compared to him going into a tunnel that isn't even that long, and the monster is straight up eating someone right in front of where he would have looked at to even enter. The monster is also in front of a bright ass exit. You should be able to see his body blocking the light, if not just see him just from entering alone. But at least both versions found a seamless way to get the wooden plank, so I'll give them both props for that. I just again think the remake did this section a lot better. Now that we finally encountered our first monster, I can talk about him in detail. Now, the original inspiration for the creature known as Lying Figure came from Ito seeing one of his programmer friends wearing a hoodie and walking while jamming out to music. He described him moving weirdly and unable to really see the guy's face or anything besides the form of his body underneath the hoodie. From this event, it helped inspire the way the Lying Figure walks, as they can appear to be either drunk or under the influence. As someone who's personally seen people either drugged out of their mind or drunk walking around, I can see where he's coming from on how weird or strange this can appear. Watching something that appears human but isn't acting like a human would is the stuff of nightmares to a lot of people. It's kind of why the Siberian dancing lady blew up on the internet a while back. But going back to what I said about the monsters, these guys aren't just designed to be creepy, they're also here to represent struggles that James himself is going through. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know what each creature is derived from, as it's been spouted millions and millions of times across the internet. But I'm still going to talk about them for those who don't. Now, you see, James is a man dealing with the loss of his wife from a disease that killed her 3 years ago. From his speech that we heard at the start of the game, he was given a letter to meet her here even though she should have been long dead. with James himself saying that damn disease killed her. While we're never told what exactly Mary had that took her life, we do see moments of her rotting body on screen to at least have an idea of how serious this illness really was. Now, the theory most people like to use for how she contracted said illness is said to have come from the lake nearby the hotel they stayed at, with my belief to be that it's two types of flesh-eating bacteria, if her skin looking the way it is isn't just for shock value, with it either being this one that is common in lakes or this other one which is found more in brackish waters, as these are known to rot your skin away and kill you over time, especially if your immune system is weak. But with that, it's actually never been confirmed what illness she has, so as far as I'm aware, she could just have ligma, I don't know. But the lying figure with the appearance of it lacking any arms, and the way it attacks the player being its ability to vomit at you, all of this is supposed to help represent the feelings of how James found himself trapped in his marriage, as his wife slowly died from this illness, with some added themes of guilt and sexual frustration from the way he felt towards his wife. And as much as people argue and say how sex isn't important in marriages, not having sex is actually one of the fastest ways to kill your marriage, not gonna lie. For the lying figure in particular, the sexual influences come from a few key parts. They are quite curvy and wear high heels, a common pair of shoes worn to look sexy or fancy. Those combined together can be viewed as sexual in nature. It's these views of guilt and sexual frustration that will plague every enemy we come across in some form, well besides the giant cockroaches, as these only seem to be here as a callback to Silent Hill 1, and they're supposed to show how they're somehow connected or something along the lines of that. The remake, however, still captures all of what I said before, but makes the choice to show that the body is sewed together with stitches to help bring the idea of being trapped inside oneself easier to notice, appearing as if whatever is under there is wanting to get out but will never be given such mercy. And cool fact in the remake, for most monsters including the lying figure, there's 3 different models for them. The only real change between them functionally is that some will vomit as a last ditch effort to injure James upon death. And there's also the Otherworld versions I'll cover soon when we get to that. I do want to bring up though how annoying these enemies are in the original. They're not so bad if they're standing, but God forbid trying to hit them when they're crawling around. Whenever this happens, I would usually just end up ignoring them entirely. Same for the bugs. Who knew that the greatest threats of all time, even worse than the iconic Pyramid Head, are a fucking restrained patient and a roach named after a cock? Now, as we walk through the foggy town, coming across dead bodies that James seems to be okay with seeing, you will notice these glowing red squares. Now, these are your save points, but besides serving that function narratively, they play a purpose. Now, everyone seems to have their own theories for what these mean, but the one I like to fall under is that each square is a part of James' fragmented memories of his time with his wife, with how each time you go to save the game, you'll see an up-close shot of James' face looking directly at the player. I really love how if a square is on the table or wall, you can see James looking straight down or forward. The first time you'll ever use one of these is on the way to the graveyard, as even James will comment how it feels like something is inside his head when you save. Now, the biggest theory coming from these save squares is the one at the end of the game, as 9 are lined up in rows of 3, forming a giant square. This also resembles the box art for the Japanese copy of Silent Hill 2, as we can see the same formation on it. That being said, I'll save the talk for this section when we come to it, as it really dives into in-game spoilers. Now, when it comes to playing on New Game Plus, there's actually some things added if you play through this mode, with this bookstore here having 3 books that you can interact with, showing hints for the 3 endings you can achieve, those being the only ones attainable on your first playthrough. It's these hidden new additions and how explorable the town really can be at times is what I feel helps make Silent Hill a lot more interesting when you play it more than once, as you'll end up checking the same locations you're familiar with in hopes something new appears. It's the same feeling I get from replaying The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. As you get more acquainted with the world, the better your overall experience becomes. It's not long till we come across the first instance of Silent Hill 2's cryptic puzzles, with us finding this note at the bar about someone living on Saul Street, apartment 9, and then a jukebox hidden under some cloth. If you paid attention earlier, you'll notice the name of the bar matches the matchbox we found from a corpse. But the note that you can find in the PS2 original still appears in the camper to help guide the player here if the matchbook wasn't enough. But viewing this example to even get here is a good showcase for how Silent Hill 2 Remake handles its puzzles. Now, I'll be honest, I'm extremely bad when it comes to most games that aren't 3D Zelda in this style. Because of that, what I'm gonna say say here can probably be taken with a grain of salt and summed up to that I'm just stupid. I really felt these puzzles dragged on for my first playthrough. Some were enjoyable for sure, but a lot either were too cryptic, tedious, or just not all that fun. Now, with this being my second run through, while remembering a good amount of these puzzles, I still am not a huge fan of all of them. This comes down to the fact that majority of Silent Hill 2's design for these usually start the same way. You come across a hint in some form, whether that be on the wall or a piece of paper. This hint can either have a cryptic message that correlates to a specific item needed for said puzzle, or it tells you a name of somewhere you can see on the map, which translates to go here. Then when you get to said place, the item you will need will be somewhere there, with it having a puzzle or just being somewhere you can pick it up. Now, this isn't a bad system per se, and when it came to the remake, having everything be more explorable as areas are expanded or new places open up, doing this made the town feel more alive and helped to have areas that could be included for said brain teasers, which is why we see the puzzles in the remake having a more explorative focus instead of what a lot of fans felt was more trial and error in the original. When this is done right, I sometimes found myself feeling like I was in a Zelda dungeon, and the pieces I was picking up to combine or use felt like this area's dungeon item. Getting these within open rooms or new floors to venture into, it again feels really rewarding every time I would check my map and James would have notes of things still needed to be solved or question why something was there. It really reminded me of one of the few good parts about Yomawari I reviewed in the first 61 Days of Spook, with their drawing out the map as you explored. Because I was being forced to actually rely on a map now, I realized how much games nowadays will just lead you to where you need to go, requiring you to do no exploring whatsoever to find clues or what have you. It's also why in a lot of modern titles I don't ever usually talk to NPCs, since more often than not, it's never really beneficial because the game is telling me with whatever it decides to use as a waypoint, this is where I need to go. But even with these highs, the lows came pretty hard as I started to feel like I was doing the exact same thing with no real difference besides what piece or item I needed to solve whatever task I had looked like. Now, this is more of a remake issue, but in time it started to really drag, especially near the end where I was ready for it to be over 5 hours before it actually was. Now, when it comes to the PS2 Silent Hill, I was surprised by what puzzles were actually different when it came to the remake, with a big example for me being the coin one found in the apartments, as you were tasked in the remake with solving a multitude of riddles and flipping 3 coins, but in the PS2 version, you just have to solve it one time. There are some moments though that are very much you gotta either know or get lucky. Like for this example, to have this corpse in this room appear that grants you a key, you need to encounter a specific person and then come back to the room. You're never told to check here again after this specific scene, so the only way you learn this is the place needed to go is by rechecking every room again. This happens quite a few times and makes the puzzles feel pretty linear. I never really found something I would need for later and then felt rewarded for already having what I needed, because the game won't really let you find these specific items till they are required, which was thankfully fixed in the remake. But even with my complaints for both versions, I do want to state these are still well made, and when they hit, they really do hit for me in both versions. But I feel that I find the remake puzzles to hit way harder for me with their solutions than the PS2 versions. I still feel the Neely's Bar jukebox is still the best showcase of this style, having the game force you to search the whole area, treating the buildings as not just a location, but another clue to be found or stock up on resources. It felt rewarding because even if you weren't being told to venture to this specific spot by a note you found, you probably would have come this way anyways. And I feel some of these solutions are still cryptic enough for these puzzles while being something you could think up yourself. Like, oh, I have a broken record and there's a record store nearby. I'm sure I could glue it together if I go here. But I still to this day don't get how anyone would think to find the number 2 button in this hole. The only hint I could assume is the text at the bar saying how this place used to be a hole in the wall, but that specific writing alone has so many theories on what it could really mean, so no one really knows. At least seeing James do something so risky without thinking it through has a story purpose, showcasing James' lack of care for himself, as this man without question will jump into holes, go in between walls, and literally do some of the nastiest things possible. All of this reckless behavior ties back to him feeling guilty, and he believes he's deserving of punishment for his wife's death. So because of that, he doesn't care for his well-being, even going back to the first conversation we had with Angela, how she warns him the town is dangerous, and he just tells her basically to fuck off. And this explains why he never leaves when he has multiple opportunities to. But another cool detail regarding the scene of James deciding to cosplay as an elephant gynecologist, you can see his hand will have this black stain that persists for a good bit. It's a little thing, but it helps sell the realism of being here in that your actions of putting your hand in a random hole does have some form of a reaction followed by it. But after we finally get the pieces and coin to start up the jukebox, we get to hear this beautiful song. Funny enough, this whole section to turn the jukebox on is absent from the original game, as all you do is come here and get the apartment key. Just again shows when Blooper does nail an explorative design for a puzzle, they nail it quite well. Now that we have a key for the back room of the bar, it lets us access this backstreet section to locate some car. Hopefully that isn't owned by the lying figure I found stuck inside the wall. Upon finding the key inside some guy's bloody jacket, we're now forced into a combat encounter as the fog picks up, adding tension to the situation. Since we're in what I would say is an actual threatening fight, I think I can finally talk about the quote-unquote RE combat. After really spending a lot of time fighting in both playthroughs, I can say right now this combat is so much better than the original in every way possible. And look, I get it, on the PS2 it's supposed to have clunky combat because these are just normal dudes. It's also to help add tension since you're really struggling fighting these creatures, with some of that struggle just coming from the fact it's impossible to hit them at times. But you see, the thing is, you struggle almost as much in the remake. Even if you're able to swing on these guys like you're a professional baseball player, if you're not careful, they can and will kill you. The strength in numbers is real and it shows. You can see these guys dodge, fake attacks causing you to move out of the way just to then be hit yourself, latch onto you so you're forced to mash to get them off, or with the nurses, they straight up grab your weapon mid-swing and push you back. There's multiple ways they all can and will approach you, making the combat feel just as tense and rewarding. I had so many moments where I was terrified of going inside a room that had multiple enemies because I knew any wrong move could lead to my ass being torn apart. And those moments where I got lucky to perform a sneak kill on a monster, it felt so adrenaline rushing as any moment they could have turned around and beat the shit out of me. I still stand by that it doesn't feel like Silent Hill, and I think the original has a way better narrative feel with how it's presented, but again, this is really the best outcome they could have done when it came to making a new and improved combat system. Too bad all of that is thrown out once you get a gun. Now, whenever James finally gets his hands on a pistol, the Texas man's most prized possession, the encounters go from well thought out approaches to 2 shots in the leg and then swing your melee on them. The majority of the monsters, even the nurses who are incredibly durable and powerful, will all go down with a few shots at their legs. So all you end up needing to do is waste 2 to 4 shots if you aim correctly at their knees and then swing. Maybe if the combat difficulty is set to hard, this wouldn't be something the player could abuse so easily, but for my second playthrough, because I could aim better this time around, I got to the point where I had over 80 rounds of ammo for the pistol, and I didn't even get the shotgun yet. That's how easy it was to abuse combat encounters, which holy hell, is there a lot of combat encounters. When it came to the OG game, I probably killed maybe around 100 enemies at most on my first run. In the remake, I killed over 369 monsters. Nice. Because someone at Blooper decided that James is going to be a fucking SWAT team member, and you will have to check every room as if Osama bin Laden himself is hiding in there. This added with the gun makes any tension die out, just like James's wife, because it turns the original vision for what Silent Hill 2's horror was to something it's not. They've made it very clear when it came to the original Silent Hill that the fear comes from what you couldn't see or predict. It's honestly why it's so dark everywhere you go compared to the remake. The blackness that surrounds you feels like a void. It's that fear of the unknown that guided the player to move forward. Even after seeing something run by in the darkness, you still knew you had to push on if you wanted to find the real fear factor of everything, that being the truth. Now, the remake tries to have moments like that where you barely catch a glimpse of something running into a room you need to go in, but then you remember the remake turns the fear of what could be in this area to, oh yeah, I already know because said creature has been doing the same thing for the past 10 hours, which I'll finally jump ahead and talk about the leggies, is what my chat like to call them. The mannequins have such a perfect introduction as James comes across clothes that he comments look familiar, with this being the part you finally acquire the flashlight. Now, both games do something similar where as soon as the light fills the room, bam, the mannequin is right there. While it's jump scare heavy, the sudden introduction to a creature you haven't seen before brings that fear of the unknown and uncertainty. But the issue on the remake side, this girl loves to hide in every corner possible, which in return makes it where if you don't scan a whole room inch by inch looking for her, she will appear and punch your dick off. Fighting the mannequins feels threatening at first since they move pretty fast and hit really hard, dodging your attacks as you desperately try to swing at it, leaping on you when you least expect it, but all that fear is gone when majority of the fights are with the mannequins. I can only be so fearful of them when I've already wiped out what feels like 100 of them by the halfway point. It's why at first whenever I reach a new area, I do get a sense of, ooh, what could be in the darkness? Hearing the radio static get louder alerting me something is nearby, just to then see this. It kind of reminds me of the Backrooms, how you had such a mysterious place where no one really understood what it truly was, with the hint something was there, but never enough info to know what it actually was. That fear of the unknown pushed the idea of the creepypasta to new heights because there was so little there it made your mind wander. Now we look at the Backrooms, and every floor has something there and it usually just wants to kill you. The mystery is gone when the chance of a monster being there goes from a 1% to you already fucking know, come on man. So I'm not gonna lie, I did get scared every time they would jump out at me, but I'm gonna be real, I don't think it was because of the mannequins themselves being scary. I'm just really sensitive to jump scares by anything. It doesn't even matter what it is. Oh, no! You fucking cunt. Oh god, terrible time for this. But I think it's time now to talk about their design. They're in the shape of a curvy figure, still fitting these sexual themes, but instead of having a top portion that resembles a human, it's instead another set of legs. If we view each leg up close, you can see they all have braces on them that would have been there to help Mary walk as she got sicker, with a very noticeable hole in their stomach as well, likely correlating to the tubes that had to be inside Mary. I think the biggest thing that stands out over the lying figure that we saw last time is that there's nothing there to ever make the player assume this would be human from far away. This is done for a reason as it helps show the feelings James felt of wanting to forget the way Mary looked as she got sicker. He would rather forget Mary's face could be associated in any way to what she looked like as she died. Honestly, a thing that carries over to each monster in some form is that their face is covered or doesn't exist. It's a nice detail that I missed at first, but that ambiguity for their faces helps sell more into the unknown factor. As I'm sure we all know, masks are quite the trope for horror since they help the viewer be on edge as you can't tell what they're planning or feeling. And other times it's used for kinky TikTok, so... Finally though, we have made our way to Woodside Apartments, and man, is this opening area quite peaceful. Contrasting with the windy streets filled with Silent Hill's equivalent of crackheads, the soft yellow light awaiting us, giving us a chance to calm ourselves. The light, however, being the only one here is quite genius. While being visually pleasing to walk into, it also serves as a guidance for the player to inspect the rooms back here so we can see what the main puzzle is for the apartment. And it's not long till we go back here and see that there's a cloth we can pull off and find it, as we're tasked with finding 3 coins to put them into the holes. A keen eye would have probably noticed that this is the second time James removed a cloth off of a puzzle we had to solve. That's because Blooper felt adding these cloths on things that are important would help the player feel like they're discovering or unlocking something for the first time. It's kind of like a very unique Christmas present, but instead of being joyful, I just feel fucking dread. Now for the apartment's design, the long linear hallways, the darkness that fills the area around, the one door open leading to the room with the flashlight acting as another guide for the player. It's all well done and you really can feel the abandoned vibes. I really like how some of the rooms still have stuff in them that really helps sell that it was once lived in, but now adds to the creepy factor of if things are still here, why did everyone leave in a hurry? What happened to them? Why is their stuff still here? Did they not care about it? It's these details that make me want to keep exploring and find the keys to open the doors to locked rooms to see what's inside of them. Again, just like a Zelda dungeon. Now, if I had to make one complaint that I already talked about, It's that these areas can feel kind of the same. At times it was really hard for me to know what floor I was even on unless I constantly checked my map. But I can't really be too mad, as this is a running issue when you have to design your areas as run-down abandoned buildings. As someone who has explored places like this, yeah, everything does blend together at some point. But dude, I feel the apartments look so much better in the original when it came to the hallways and rooms, with the blue helping stand out from all the brown, the wallpaper that can be seen plastered everywhere, the fact you have 2 entrances to go into to reach different sides of the building, with the final part selling this area to me is just how truly cramped you feel in these hallways. All of this helped create a sense of claustrophobia that I never really felt that strongly in the remake, and I find the moment where you come across the dead body staring at the TV to be a bit more shocking in this. When this appears, it's very unexpected since more than likely you've already searched the room and have learned nothing is really here. Then later on you come back and see this. It's way more shocking to me when your expectations of this being the same room you just explored ends up being broken. Then when you examine the body, a sudden realization hits you. Holy shit, this is just James's model. In the remake, they cover the face, making it way harder to tell, which I feel loses that dread that builds up when you see what appears to be you, but dead. Now that being said, the dead bodies we see all being James's model is still present in the remake, with some being way more obvious than others. So I just find it really weird that they covered this one's face specifically. Now it's here where we start to pick up handgun ammo and soon find a note mentioning that a certain tenant in the room was rumored to own a gun. Upon making it inside, we see the handgun sitting on a shopping cart that has a logo calling back to the pharmacy in Silent Hill 1, and we pick that boy up and we're ready to blast. Now, I've said what I needed to say about the handgun already, so I'll just mention a cool detail I'm sure a lot of you didn't even realize. Whenever you aim down the sights, eventually James will shoot it. Even if you never press the trigger, this will always occur. It's done to show how James has no real skill with firearms, so he basically misfired. It's just something I wanted to point out because when I was told about it, it really blew my mind. After leaving the room, it won't be long till we're introduced to a new character, and that being this child here who kicks the key away from James and steps on his hand. While we don't know who she is or if she's even a real person, it's at least something we want to keep noted as it means we're not the only ones here. But I'll just go ahead and explain who this girl is. Her name is Laura. This young child ended up getting to Silent Hill thanks to the help of someone we will meet later, as it's been confirmed in the Book of Memories. Plus the other detail like the intro scene of the two standing with each other and also how Laura and said guy interact, showing they're very much aware who they are to some extent. As time goes on, you will encounter her more as she's quite bratty to James and will often insult him. At one point even yelling at James that he never loved Mary anyways. It's soon revealed to us over time that Mary and Laura were in the same hospital together and spent a whole year interacting. She came here after getting a letter from Mary about her passing away and proceeded as she came to Silent Hill instead of dying. The reason why a lot of our interactions with her are quite negative comes from the fact she knows who James is, since again he would visit the hospital. But as Mary's sickness got worse, he also stopped showing up as much. Because of James' lack of support for his wife, she probably took it as he really didn't love her. Funny enough, I actually had no idea this was a character in this, so she was something that wasn't spoiled for me at all. Now her in the remake I feel is much better casted voice wise, but the issue is they still hired a child voice actress, and just like the majority of children voice acting, yeah, they're pretty much all bad. The original was especially horrendous at times, but I do think she has a charm for filling the role of bratty child compared to what we got in the remake. And I also find a lot of her line deliveries to be a lot funnier.
I don't know. What's a big dum-dum like you doing here anyway?
For Maria,
Maybe I did.
I don't know, maybe I did. I don't know, Dad. Speaking of funny interactions, during the development for the PS2 version, there's a part where Laura's VA had to yell at James and hit him, and it actually caused Guy Chi's real-life daughter to get scared for his safety. But yeah, even in the remake, there's some lines that I felt were delivered pretty stilted, but in a way, it was quite nostalgic as it reminded me of just how shit the original voice work could be at times. During the game, you will come across a lot of her drawings showing she's pretty much running around having a blast. Well, turns out it's because she's the only one here with no grief or sadness in her heart. So all she sees for Silent Hill is just an empty town, meaning anything James comes across that wants to kill him is completely not there for her. This is the first instance where you realize everyone sees Silent Hill differently. Now as we explore the abandoned apartment looking for the coins, I started to notice one thing about the remake that I really don't like at times, and it's how they pad out some of the environmental puzzles, with the most egregious example being the clock you can find. Now when it comes to the OG game, all you need to do is find a key and unlock it. In the remake, you have to find all the clock hands now, going from one item needed to be located limited to 3. Strangely, this one gave so many people trouble that if you type how to solve the clock puzzle for Silent Hill 2, even if you put PS2 after, you only get walkthroughs for the remake. It just goes to show how tedious this one became, even if solving it is as simple as looking at the wall. I, however, just brute forced it and it worked. Now we can finally talk about the scene you've all been waiting for. Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head, or also known as Red Pyramid Thing, gets his iconic look from literally the pyramid on his head. But if we check early concept art, he used to be just some dude with his face covered by white fabric. But because this just made him look like a guy with his face hidden, Ito wanted something far scarier, which he settled on the triangular design as these sharp acute angles help push the feeling of pain and punishment. This then follows with said role Pyramid Head has towards James. You see, Pyramid Head never actually wants to kill James. The only reason why he ever will is because it's a video game, you gotta have him be threatening somehow. But his main goal is to get him to wake up and come to terms with the guilt he has. There's actually quite a few moments both in the remake and the OG version where you can clearly see he's making a path for James to follow, or even grabbing him himself to push him towards where he needs to go, showing that while he's probably not a good guy per se, he is trying to help, which brings me to the first scene we witness of him, which was altered in the remake as apparently it was seen as a bit risque. But turns out, while yes, what we're seeing here is perceived as sexual in some form, it's not actually what everyone thought, as in reality he's torturing the mannequins and trying to kill them because he's actively wanting James to snap out of his illusions and face the guilt he has. The action we're seeing is supposed to bring out those negative emotions James is hiding, helping him remember what happened and face it. But what this moment wants to bring to the player, however, is discomfort and shock, as I think anyone walking through a room to see this would be pretty taken aback. Oh my god. Okay, buddy. Sorry about that. The point from seeing this is to make your mind race around on what you're actually witnessing, while for James, he knows what it correlates to, he's just not wanting to face it. The reason why I do find it weird, however, people seem to assume this is unconsensual sex, comes from the fact that at least with the mannequins, they don't have genitals. There's nothing here to have sex with. To prove as well it's not that type of abuse, we get another look at the scene in a video that is shown in the Art of Silent Hill. It's a music video depicting this moment in particular, with close-up shots of what's going on, and again, while it does look sexual, I'm not gonna lie, it's apparently still not that. If anything, what we're actually seeing is Pyramid Head holding them down from escaping and letting them slowly suffer till they succumb to their death. Which, to avoid heavy spoilers right now since I want to cover it later, it makes sense when the big reveal occurs. This role he plays is also why Pyramid Head doesn't just kill James after he shoots at him in the closet, as again, he's not there to kill James in a physical sense, but instead kill the fog hiding the true emotions and memories he's choosing to forget. That's why I feel this scene is so iconic, and the fact so many people can perceive this in many different ways just helps showcase how amazing and thought-provoking Silent Hill can truly be. Well, now we can finally talk about the next person we meet in Silent Hill. The one scene in the intro with Laura, Eddie. Weirdly enough, in the remake, you actually meet up with him first before seeing Pyramid Head, while in the original, it's after. And James will even ask if Eddie is friends with Pyramid Head, with him replying he's not sure what James is talking about, helping add to the idea of things that James sees aren't there for everyone. Now, I'll be 100%, Eddie in the remake is by far the perfect iteration I feel they could have gone for. Even the voice actor, in my opinion, is perfect for the role. It's on the same level as how I feel towards the English VAs for Edward Elric and Alphonse. Now, that's not to say his other voice actor was worse, as I think what they wanted Eddie to behave like for the 2001 version, it really works there just fine. But I just can't get over how much Scott, the new voice actor, makes the portrayal of him come off as more distraught and disturbed, as we watch a man go from someone who feels weak and useless from how others treat him to slowly breaking down, becoming the thing most people fear. Now, for how Eddie got here, it's quite a mystery, but he does tell us he's on the run from the police as he did something bad. It's also believed the van at the start of the game is also Eddie's, judging from the trash we can see inside. When James first meets him, we find him in the bathroom vomiting as a dead body is stuffed inside a fridge. Before we can question him about it, he already answers that he wasn't responsible for the guy that's dead, with him saying he was like that before he even got here. One major difference between the remake and the original version is how Eddie comes off as. On the PS2, he sounds very sarcastic. He just seems more annoyed by the situation around him while trying to talk through the dry heaves. However, this new take on Eddie lets you truly hear the fear and sorrow in the way he talks, making him seem very pitiful, as if you're supposed to feel bad for him. Mix that with him being overweight and throwing up in front of a toilet, the imagery of a bumbling idiot rings strong. James even reinforces these feelings as he tells him he should leave as it's not safe here, while to James this is him trying to help, but in Eddie's mind, he's just patronizing him, assuming he's not strong enough to survive on his own, helping reinforce the thoughts and ideas everyone tells him, with it really coming together when he learns that James won't go with him as he chooses to stay to look for Mary even after telling him it was dangerous. So to Eddie, James is basically saying, look, you're useless and I'm not, so get out of here. We can see his mood get worse with every encounter we have with him, as each comment seemingly harmless to James is a fire lighting under him, causing him to slowly hate us for reminding him of his bullies, with this evolving into the final confrontation later on, but I'll cover that for when we get there. That being said, going back to what I mentioned before about the worlds being different to each person, in the remake we can see Eddie's breath every time he talks, with this being a common thing for places that are cold, while James isn't having this occur at all, meaning we can assume that his version of Silent Hill is cold enough to see your breath. Just a very subtle attention to detail I love a lot. Upon clearing the puzzles with the coins and seeing Pyramid Head, it's time to transport ourselves to the other world. James opens a door with a gap under him only showing blackness, letting him step over to the other side. While on the PS2, you can see the ground and everything around you, making it not feel as otherworldly, and as if you're just going to another room. Another change I feel Blooper did for the better. Now, this world in context is a place that seems to only exist for James, with the novelizations for the series mentioning that when James went to this place one time while around Laura, she was unable to find him. The other world is technically supposed to be a realm beyond the fog world, where once this person is here, they're basically stuck here till they find a way out. While the place we've been exploring for most of the game is a more unified area for everyone. Visually, you can tell which location you're in by how much rust and dry blood you can see, with barbed wire filling the area, shingles and walls peeling away, making huge gaps that allow you to see through the floor below. Monsters here are quite aggressive and way more deformed. Lying figures, for an example, have tape all over their bodies that resemble peeling skin. All of this creates what was already an unnerving creature into something of a nightmare. Cloth also plays a big role here. This was done to help Blooper Team make striking set pieces that not only wow and attract the player to go and investigate, but also help guide you to certain areas or paths without them needing to directly tell you. One puzzle you will find here is a radio needs to be knocked down from a cage, with chains and cloths above leading out to the room. Not only does this look visually pleasing, but these chains above help guide the player to the solution while again not feeling handholdy. They even bring this concept back but makes it even more challenging later on. I want to really give Blooper some props for how much they really went into making sure this part of the game felt as dreadful and run down as possible. If you do want to see them go into more detail about what they did to make these areas, there will be a link in the description below where they did a showcase for the process of making the Otherworld. However, besides everything I just said, you're still traversing the same area with new puzzles. It's only when you start really reaching the end of the game when this Otherworld becomes trippy and otherworldly, pun intended. Now eventually we will meet Angela again, as we can see she's laying down in front of a mirror, seemingly calm, but any emotion seems gone, as we can witness a knife is caressed in her hand. James asks what she's planning to do with that while assuring her there's other ways of dealing with their problems, but Angela tells him how it's easier to keep running, and that maybe we all deserve what happened to us, and that we're all the same. James, clapping back, tells her in no way is he like her. Angela notices the fear in his voice and taunts him for a second, but then apologizes. James then questions if she's found her mother yet, and she tells him no, that she's still looking around for her, as she says she's unsure where her mom would be or what house she even lived at. When questioned if she really lived in this town, we see Angela get up and turn to face him, as she wants to know how James would have known where she lived. Struggling at first to say why, he just assumed because she's looking around here, she must be from the town. This seems to calm Angela down as she gives a faint apology, with her then asking if James found the person he came to find. Obviously he hasn't yet, but then he proceeds to show her a picture of Mary, saying it's his wife, finally revealing to Angela she died years ago, so he's unsure why he's still even here. When she hears this, she starts to go back into another episode of saying how she needs to find her mama. This is when she wants James to take the knife from her, since if she kept it, she doesn't know what she would do. But when we go to grab it, she lunges at him for a second, causing him to get scared. Upon realizing she did this, she starts to freak out, yelling she's sorry and that she's been bad while rushing out of the room. Now, there's a bit to unpack from this, so I'll start with the biggest change for Angela that this scene here is a good showcase for. Clearly, this town and the negative effects it brings onto a person trapped here are starting to show. Granted, while our first encounter with Angela I wouldn't say made her come across as the most sane person, she at least had a consistent emotional state throughout. Now she seems to show very faint signs of switching from one emotion to another, all caused from the littlest of questions, with the ending being the biggest outburst we've seen so far. Clearly, whatever she's witnessing while trying to find her mom is taking its toll. These outbursts will slowly get worse as time goes on, but for now, James having the knife she gives us will be important if you do decide you want the in-water ending, as looking at it will help achieve that specific one, and if you know what happens in it, the knife is a good showcase on the thought process James faces to pick said path. But upon finishing the clock puzzle that happens in the Otherworld, we soon run into Pyramid Head, bringing us to the first real fight that is entirely in a new room. In the original, you fought him in a cramped area that had some stairs that were flooded, with you also witnessing a loud moan as it's more sexual imagery. Pyramid Head, seeing you walk in on his moment, proceeds to get pissed off and attacks you. But here in the remake, the room is wide, dark, and filled with a lot of spots for cover, and Pyramid Head seems more like he was waiting, as if he knew you were coming, as he stands there just to effortlessly toss the creature he dragged out of the room from your first encounter. I really think the imagery the remake brings fits more in what Pyramid Head is supposed to be, as the original cutscene comes off more as if he's mad you interrupted his daily nut. But this, it looks like he's straight up going, hey, you still want to ignore what happened? Okay, let me remind you myself. Watching this man walk slowly towards you, dragging the sword behind him while sparks shoot to the sky, this goes so hard. Again, I think the original fight feels more like a Silent Hill encounter, but I can't deny dodging his sword swings just to melee attack his ass makes me feel like I'm in fucking Elden Ring. I even die the same way, just like Elden Ring. A cool detail in the original, however, is that Pyramid Head during your first real fight rarely will swing his sword. Unless you're standing far away enough from him where it probably won't even hit you, he would much rather grab you and choke you for a bit to then put you down, which I think helps push the idea he's not trying to kill you. Here though, this motherfucker wants you dead. Again, it's just hard to see this man as wanting to show James the truth because somehow that translates to getting chopped in half apparently. So while I feel the remake has the better fight, I still think in battle the original narratively outclasses this. At least I'll give props though to Pyramid Head. Whenever he heads out of the room in the remake, you can go over and still try to fight him, but doing so has him one-shot you every time, which makes it feel like he's going, while I'm forced to leave, don't see my mercy as weakness. After easily surviving, we can now head out to the apartments to run into Laura sitting on a wall. It goes about as well as you would think.
You didn't love Mary anyway.
What? Hey, wait! How do you know her name?
I'll be real, finally being back outside in the awful fog world never felt so good. If there's one thing the Otherworld really does to the player is break you down. In my first playthrough, I felt like I defeated a gauntlet every time I cleared an area because of how stressful they make the Otherworld feel, which is a compliment to the game and not a critique because by the end, I felt the same way James did. I was so over this shit. We finally now arrived to Rosewater Park. I think this has to be my favorite area in the whole game. It brings me the same peaceful vibes I got from the forest walk at the start. It's also small but packed full of really interesting architect, like the statues or this middle area with the benches. It's just really nice. I also like if you try to leave here before finding the person we need to, James, upon being able to actually walk out, will comment how he remembered the gate being locked before. It's these little things that make me want to visit this place in real life. It's also not because it has a boardwalk near a large body of water. Oh, no, it couldn't be because of that. It's not like I've ever talked about my love for open bodies of water, huh? Now, there's not really much here to see on the boardwalk besides the closed food stands, but it does get my mind running on what this place was like before it was abandoned. If you play on the original version, you would actually meet the next character pretty quickly once you step down to the boardwalk area. But in the remake, you have to walk down a long path, slowly seeing the silhouette of a woman come into view. When we see her, we can see that James gets confused and shouts out thinking it's Mary, but turns out, it's just a lady that looks like her named Maria. Now, Maria is probably the most important character James encounters for the story, as having the protagonist come across a woman who looks identical to his wife besides her hair and attire brings a situation that must be hard to cope with for James. Now, obviously, sexual frustration and heartbreak is a big theme for the game, so having those emotions show through because James comes face to face with a woman who reminds him of both of those feelings. It's such a clever way to add tension and play with James's heartstrings. I really feel the impact of the situation and the many different emotions shown is done better in the remake. Seeing someone who's been pretty composed throughout with only very few moments of him losing his cool, to now watch him try to avoid talking with her as he tries to leave as soon as he realizes she wasn't his wife. Even when she offers to tag along, he's a bit hesitant about letting her join. While before with Angela and Eddie later on, he offers to let them join him with no real issue, showing that clearly seeing Maria is really messing with him. In the PS2 version, he kind of just seems annoyed that she's not his wife. There was even a good amount of extra dialogue that was removed for the remake, which I find to be a pretty good choice since a lot of that removed dialogue has him talking more about his wife and their history, which counteracts his behavior that he shows when anyone else before wants to know about his wife. But that being said, Maria also faced some controversy, mostly due to the fact her clothes are different. Now, when it came to the previous design, she was dressed way more provocative, showing her tummy and having a very short skirt. This was done intentionally to make her look sexy, but also feel realistic with her faults her body did have, with the devs bringing up her tummy and spots on her skin. Well, her new design, while still fitting a very sexy appeal, it's way more toned down. Gone are the days of freeing the gut, but I don't know, I've seen the game modded to include her original outfit and I think it just really looks out of place, especially compared to the new drip she's proceeding to flex on us with. Yeah, gamers, those aren't pipes leaking throughout the world. That's the drip coming from Maria. Now, technically, her old outfit is still here as she will find it in a hotel room you come across and ask if she would look good in it. I like if you do interact, James is just so awkward about it and really wishes she would just go away. But you can outright ignore her and she will clap back with how she would have looked good in it anyways, as the look is a classic, which is just a very cheeky reference to the original. But if I had to say which Maria I found to be the best, I'd say the 2001 portrayal, as she loses a lot of that uncanniness she had in her face and expressions. On the PS2 and the FMVs, it always looked as if her face was distorted. Compare that to the remake and she seems normal, if that makes sense. But because she doesn't want to be alone, we're now forced to take her along with us. Now, when I played this for my first playthrough, I actually listened to her about not going off the beaten path, so I actually missed out on the bowling alley and the pizza shop. While not much is there, I can say I liked having the option of making my way down here and getting to explore the bowling parlor and seeing James tell her that she can wait outside if she wants, being a fun callback to the original scene where she didn't go inside because she hated bowling. Now, to most people, it does seem like a weird inclusion to have her say that she hates bowling, but this was done for a specific reason I'll cover later. But yeah, this whole section has a few fun callbacks, like for instance, the scene of Eddie and James where he yells at him for eating pizza was sadly removed. And that's because Eddie is no longer at the bowling alley. I actually was so upset learning the scene was gone that I bought some after beating it just so I could eat pizza. Thankfully, this scene is still here just with James saying it to himself.
This town's full of monsters. Who could just sit here and eat pizza?
He said it! He said it!
Another callback is walking down the street to find a dead body with the pin code for the safe back at the bowling parlor. If you pick up the note, you will hear two loud sounds followed by slamming. Upon investigation, these two mannequins were thrown by something. This is a callback to the PS2 version, where you see two of these guys jump out to the road. Now, while exploring with Maria, I grew to really love the random dialogue she says to you based on your action. Like if you go away from the hotel, she will bring it up. If James tries to go somewhere that's blocked, she'll mention it, with her giving a bit of sass too followed by it. If you shine a light in her face or save at a save point, she comments about your behavior as well. I still think my favorite interaction was at first she would get scared and tell me to warn her if I was going to smash windows. But if you do it a lot, she finally says how she's gotten used to you doing it and will no longer get scared by it. These moments made me love her cheeky and spunky attitude. In the original, she still has that charm whenever the cutscenes happen, like her unlocking a door and James is clearly trying to get a peek, but more often than not, I found her annoying as she would actively get in the way of me fighting monsters and then proceed to get attacked herself. Crazy though, you can actively hit her and blood comes out, which is something removed in the remake, to the point you can actually kill her if you're not careful. I think Maria, however, for both versions are about the same for me when it comes to what I like and don't like, as I can't really pinpoint a favorite. Cool fact though, she's the only one who seems to see exactly what James can, and the monsters will attack her if you're not careful, making her so far the only person we've come across who actively is experiencing these same things as James, and breaks the norm of how we know Silent Hill works. Trust me, this will make sense later. After picking up a few things for some of the later endings that I want to go for, we end up getting ambushed by some monsters and have to make our way to a safe place, with this being Heaven's Night. Now on the PS2, you actually come here because you're trying to catch up with Laura, who we saw with Eddie in the bowling alley. And this place sadly gets treated as just another room you go through. Like legit, all this effort for a really beautiful neon lit room and you can spend less than 30 seconds here. But like most things in the remake, they expanded on this and you actually cross through because Maria says she knows a place that lovers go to, making James believe she could possibly have some idea where his wife and his special place could be. There's even a whole scene of her pretending to strip down and dance on the pole in the middle of the room, trying to tease James and even offering alcohol. But you'll notice when he sees the glass, he starts to get really nervous, indicating he used to drink, and it's implied he was an alcoholic, as he will completely refuse whatever Maria offers while showing common signs of someone who is trying to not relapse. There's actually some hidden dialogue you can find in the room on the PS2 version, where James says how drinking won't fix the problems and guilt he has. This also ties to the game always using water everywhere you go, as it's been theorized to be a subtle sign of James's drinking problems, as he gets so plastered hoping to drown out his pain. So the sudden change in his demeanor when shown a shot, it's again just how much the remake shows but never tells. Present those amazing scenes with the beautiful neon colors filling the darkness, as the track that plays on both versions is one of my top 5 songs in the game. Man, is Heaven's Night probably one of my favorite areas that again is treated as a room transition in the original. And I mean, if you're still not convinced why this place is so cool, what other context can you have James standing next to a stripper pole? Even the comment Maria makes about it is priceless. Now after leaving Heaven's Night and going to a park that Mary wasn't at, we hear a sound coming from the theater and see Eddie and Laura inside. The same scene that would have played in the bowling alley now plays out here, sadly removing James's sudden burst about the pizza. I do find the way the remake presents this scene to the player is pretty cool. As we can see here, James gets annoyed at Eddie for not wanting to go out and help find Laura, while this time around he asks if he wants to come, with Eddie even commenting how now James wants him around, showing a very different reaction to James than we saw before. Just again really shows the difference between the versions of Eddie, as the same scene is vastly different in the mood and tone when they're side by side. And I really like the talk that Laura and him have before they hear James coming. It feels like both of them having a bit of heart to heart about why they're here, with Eddie mentioning he's on the run from the police, while Laura, being a child, tells him he should just go back and apologize. While this would be an option in most cases, it's something Eddie can't ever do, because he doesn't take accountability, and it's why he's stuck here in Silent Hill. We noticed that from the first interaction of him mentioning the dead guy in the fridge. Without even being asked, he blurted out it wasn't him, making the only way he can ever come to terms with everything is to just accept fault and take accountability for his actions. Now, one thing I want to cover about their talk is before you walk into the bowling alley, we can actually hear Eddie ask if Laura found Mary. This was entirely removed from the remake, and I don't really know why, since we already know that Laura at least knows who Mary is. So just really weird it was removed, since it could have added to the mystery for how James's wife and this child are connected. But now we have to chase Laura to the next place we will spend a good few hours at, that being Brookhaven Hospital. Now, Brookhaven actually has a lot of lore to it that helps explain a bit of what was going on in this town. It was a hospital made to help treat people who contracted the plague that took the lives of the residents who resided here, but was soon closed down and reopened to be a mental hospital, which is why as you go through it and discover notes left behind and the recordings in the director's office, they're all correlating to the 3 mental patients, with there being 2 theories behind them. One being that they all represent different personalities James has, from one being overtly violent, another suicidal, and finally the last one showing signs of guilt and delusions, with the other one being that they're supposed to represent Angela, James, and Eddie. But to me, both are pretty spot on for what they could be. You can also find a lot of posters here and signs adding more into the ideas of suicide. But the reason Brookhaven is important to James is from his trauma of hospitals. This makes sense as someone who had to watch their wife slowly die while not getting better and having to see the same nurses, doctors, and the white walls that surround everything. It's enough to break you down and make you fear hospitals. It's also shoved in your face that doctors in the series don't care about actually curing their patients, and if anything, see them as money-making machines. It's why it's said that many deaths, assaults, and horrible work environments plague this building almost as much as the real sickness affecting the town. However, upon doing research for the hospital, I learned the remake version of Brookhaven is based on the hospital in Yorktown, called Yorktown Memorial Hospital in Texas. As you can clearly see from the front, it's pretty close. Now, this was a change done for the remake, and why Yorktown Hospital was chosen comes from the supposed dark history of their real-life place. Many sources state malpractices during its run. Apparently, over 2,000 people died. Just like Brookhaven, Yorktown's hospital also had to close down and reopen again. It was said that nurses here were abused by the priest, with even a whole murder plot that supposedly happened in the basement. But even the tour guides for the hospital stated they're not sure if the murders really happened. And speaking of tours, so Yorktown is actually really close to where I live. So I decided to go there and explore to really get a good comparison to how well Brookhaven can capture a rundown abandoned hospital. And yeah, Blooper nails the exact feelings I get of walking through a long decrepit hallway inside of a haunted hospital. You really start to appreciate the little details they put into how the floor tiles are cracked or peeling, the sound of crunching and clicks as debris breaks under your feet, how dark these areas can be as soon as light is gone. Now, while the hospital layout isn't exact as Yorktown's abandoned building, it having a basement and 3 floors is quite spot on. Now, if you're interested in a full video of me exploring the place, then I'll have you covered soon, but for now, let's enjoy the small bit of time we share with Maria before she decides to go lay down inside of a hospital room. If you are going for the Maria ending, then talking with her and checking to make sure she's still alive will help push for that ending to occur. But you can outright ignore her for most of your time here if you really want. But going into the aesthetics of the hospital, one thing I do want to point out when you walk inside is how the weather goes from a foggy gray to this nice orange sunset peeking through the windows. So there actually is a purpose to this, and the reason being is to show James is optimistic about the doctors helping his wife at first, to then watch it slowly fade as he realizes his wife is going to die. Yeah, I'm not joking. But that's why it's so weird to come into this area as it's all foggy outside, and all of a sudden here we are with a bright orange ass sun, you know, shining through the windows. But this orange really helps give the place some character. I really did like the puzzles for this area a lot, as the notes are cryptic enough, but slowly it all builds to what you need to find. Getting access to the elevator and being able to travel to any of the floors really helps makes this map feel a lot more open to choices in how you want to tackle them, as you can easily have moments of finding solutions to puzzles you haven't even learned needed to be solved yet, just from the way you explore. All of this while learning more about how abused and broken the patients and staff truly were, as you can read notes about the 3 people that the director was desperately trying to help. You see him mention in the notes that everyone told him it's not possible to save these individuals, and anytime you would come across a note that said progress was being made, it would soon be scratched off as he was back to square one. And if the theory is true for this representing James or him and the other 2, it really does bring all of this together for me. Now, since we're in a hospital, I'm sure you knew this was coming, but it's time to talk about the bubblehead nurses. To me, these feel like the clickers of Silent Hill 2, as their sounds and erratic twitches really bring the same mood. While they're not a one-shot if they attack you, they're still something you want to try to avoid, as they can hit hard, stop your attacks easily, and are quite tanky for how fragile they look. It's to the point if you don't go for the knee blast or get accurate headshots, it can take upwards of 7 to 10 shots to end their suffering. The name for the bubblehead nurses comes from the fact their actual heads seem to be covered by something translucent, moving with the same consistency of a water balloon or bubble. And if light hits their head at the right angle, you're able to see that their heads have white liquid inside pulsating, with these 2 long parts going down their cheeks on the side, which kind of looks like the Chaos Chow's head parts to me. Weird comparison, I know. Now, it was rumored this head cover we see is supposed to symbolize a condom as it correlates to James' sexual frustration, but this has since been debunked, as while there is white liquid that does pour out when you shoot them in the head, it's not really ever stated what this mysterious goop is. I personally feel the very risky outfit that would make Maria blush and the leggings help add more to the sexual vibe over the idea of a nurse stretching a condom on her head. The biggest detail I feel a lot of people miss is that the mouths of the nurses is a red square, just like the save points, making the delusion theory for what these squares mean a bit more believable. Now, while I can't see this really myself, apparently their face is supposed to mimic a baby's, and Ito has confirmed this. Now, just like the apartments, there is a Otherworld section. The nurses here will start to have spikes on their faces, hiding a lot of what we could see before, with tape all over their clothes and body, helping add to the extreme dirty look the Otherworld goes for, compared to the somewhat clean appearance the others show in the Fog world. But yeah, I can see why these are a fan favorite, and the fact they can just go toe-to-toe with you and easily end you is why I've learned to respect them. Now, if you do decide to check up on Maria for the third time, you will notice she's missing. But apparently James couldn't care less, as he leaves without even saying a word. Now, more than likely, when you were exploring, you would have saw Laura on the 3rd floor, but she pretty much tells you to fuck off. But with that prior knowledge and finally being able to access the roof, I'm sure we can get to Laura in no time. Oh, shit. Well, when life gives you lemons, you walk off falling 3 flights of stairs. When we run into Laura again, she's confused how James knows her name, and when we let her know Eddie told us, she insults him, calling him a big fat blabbermouth. James then questions her how does she know who Mary is and why does she keep running away from him. Laura then responds back if she doesn't say how, is he just going to yell at her? But James tries again to comfort her and assures her he won't yell. Then the bombshell is dropped. Laura says to James she knew Mary as they met in the hospital a year ago. Now, of course, this makes no sense because Mary died 3 years ago. Laura tries to run away again, but James, being the track star of a man, catches her and tells Laura it's too dangerous to be out here alone. She questions about what the danger could be, honing back to the fact that only he and the other two can see these monsters since they all have guilt in their heart. She, being pure heart, sees an abandoned town unaware of the monsters that roam. Laura gives in and tells him if he wants her to follow us, we need to grab a letter from Mary she left in one of the rooms. When we go inside to find it, the door slams shut on us, welcoming us to the weirdest boss that I actually didn't know existed, Flesh Lips. Now, real quick, this is a joke in the original, genuinely the worst boss in the game. Unlike in the remake, you fight 2 of them, but all they do is slowly move towards you and swipe. That's the whole encounter. And after you win, it's supposed to show James passing out with this weird camera shot, followed by a trippy scene of Mary talking to us. But this is really hard to follow, even with the idea it's supposed to be ambiguous. All of this is probably why I never hear anyone talk about this monster. Compare that to the remake and holy shit, does this feel like an absolute unit to come across. Now, if you don't know about the cheap trick of shooting the hand that's holding the roof, the first half of the fight is pretty hard. You're needing to track it as it crawls through the roof and bursts down to surprise you. I even love as more of the roof is exposed, you can see it up there moving around. Now, the second half has the flesh lip come to your level and create arms and legs that it uses to run up and spin attack on you. It's a really great and challenging threat. Like, I can't believe how well this fight is compared to the original. Like, genuinely, this is you, and this is the guy your wife tells you not to worry about. Except James doesn't have to worry because his wife is dead. Well, now that I'm done creaming myself from the amazing fight, let's talk about what the absolute Christ almighty funky mode edition is this monster. Why is its mouth where its cooch should be? More importantly, hear me out. The flesh lips seem to be a giant bag or bed sheet with something or someone inside, and a mouth near its lower torso, being the eye-catching part for most people. It's also stuck inside a box frame with it unable to escape in the remake, using said frame for attacks and movements. Ito's inspiration for this creature comes from 2 sources, one being Isamu Noguchi's art piece, Death Lynch figure, that resembles the horrible actions done to African Americans back in the day, and the second one being Man with No Legs by Joel Peter Wiccan. The remake, however, since it has the frame becoming its means of moving, spiders were a big inspiration for the movement itself. The design does seem to change in later games, with one having a more prominent face, but overall the idea still stays. This monster, like the ones before, does have sexual themes, with the biggest being where the mouth is placed. But the main idea for Flesh Lips is the personified feeling he had when Mary would lash out at him during her sickness, which is why whenever it screams, James completely can't move. The cloth and frame it's stuck inside is referencing the bedridden state Mary was in. Flesh Lips also looks like the painting we will see later on that features Pyramid Head in these hanging boxes. This was a painting that apparently stuck with James the first time he saw it, so could be how the Delusions formed into what we see here. Cages also seem to be another big part for James's Delusions, as the same when the bosses inside can be seen scattered around the apartments in the Otherworld. Now, this won't be the last time I mention Flesh Lips, but after defeating it, we're kidnapped by a second one hiding, a reference to the PS2 fight, with this trippy scene playing out as Mary calls to us. Welcome to the Otherworld of the hospital. Besides being extremely dark, it's one of the few areas I think stands out above the rest, as majority of your time here will be lit by red lights, to the point in some sections you can completely turn your flashlight off and still see. There's also quite a lot of little secrets here that I find both amusing and adds a bit to the mystery. One being this specific room where you walk inside, a faint breathing can be heard. It sounds almost like it's from someone dying. And well, that's because the same room number Mary was hospitalized in is the same number as this room here. It's never officially stated whose breathing this is, but more than likely it's Mary's. It also sounds very much like the death rattle, and if you ever hear this, it's usually a sign you're going to die, which is probably something James heard a lot from Mary's sickly breathing. There's actually another moment that plays out where James can hear what appears to be a lady screaming on one of the recording devices. And while it's not something you can normally see, James has a unique interaction with said recording. If you manipulate the camera to face James when this occurs, you can see he's fidgeting and looking in all directions. This is pretty common with stress responses to something occurring. These two moments are believed to be Mary related, as again, no other time does breathing in a random room or James reacting in this way to sound ever occur unless it's something to do with involving Mary. Now the main puzzle for this part has you unlocking a chest in the middle of this room, as chains will guide you to paths where you can solve something to learn what the combination code is. This is also being done while surrounded by some of the hardest enemies up to this point. I personally love the fact you need to really be aware of your surroundings and find ways to follow the chains. Finally, when you get to unlock everything, your reward is nothing. Bro, come on, James, cheer up, dude. You're acting like you were forced to play Planet Dob. We get the basement elevator button from a statue door that opens up, and once inside, we hear this random voice come on as it starts to ask us questions about the history of Silent Hill. On my first playthrough, I assumed this was for the ending, but turns out there's a random chest you can come across that can be opened if you answer these 3 questions correctly. The awards are just syringes and shotgun shells, but it's better than what we got before. Now for why this appears, it seems to be more gameplay reason, in case you're low on ammo or whatever, as this is never brought up in any way whatsoever in game, besides Maria mentioning it in the PS2 version about how weird that was. The only interesting thing I did learn is the voice we hear is the same VA of the doctor that told James his wife was going to die, while in the remake, the doctor is voiced by Luke Roberts as well. Finally, we come across Maria again, and boy is she pissed. Getting upset at James for the fact she herself decided to leave the room and, almost died. She starts to complain to James about how he only cares about his dead wife. Like, yeah, bitch, I've been ignoring you for the most part, why are you surprised? We do some more puzzle solving and find some rings to put on the statue's finger, and now we can head into this long hallway, where Pyramid Head soon appears and begins chasing us. I'll be real, in the PS2 version, it has such a better chase because the game never tells you he's coming, as you're just running along and then this guy is just behind us. While in the remake, we get this whole cutscene and everything. I think any tension for this chase is butchered by the speed James moves. Compare this to the PS2, it's night and day. James is so much faster and feels urgent as you run away from Pyramid Head, but PS5 James, man looks like he's not running from a deranged killer, but instead trying to catch the ice cream bus that just passed his house. Like, fuck dude, even Maria's beating me. But sadly, even though James gets through, Maria doesn't. Watching them both struggle to then see her get stabbed through the chest, as their silence from both of them echoes louder than any scream. Can you shut the fuck up? Seeing James drop down to the floor in agony, as once again, he couldn't save someone. And it's really crazy that after this, James stays silent for a good while. He does have a self-monologue in the original, but besides that, man really has nothing to say. As he walks out into the cold rain above, he's just like how he started, all alone. Now that we're getting to see the town at night, this always makes me quite intrigued to explore it more. Walking into areas we've been to, but seeing them now all decayed and broken, it's something I wish the original title focused more on, since the majority of the places you could have revisited are blocked off or not much has changed. My only real complaint is just how many monsters are roaming the streets. Technically, they were doing the same thing in the original, but since avoiding combat is so easy there, it never became tedious. On one hand, it is night, and now that we're trapped in the Otherworld version of the town, it makes sense to have it be a more risky trek. But as I said before, there's only so many ways to make the same 3 enemy types we've been fighting interesting. I just find it more tedious and annoying having to stop multiple times in a row to deal with a monster just so I can explore a bit. I also feel having so many combat encounters after making James witness the death of someone who looked like his late wife really ruins that somberness and feelings James is going through, as he's now all alone. Being real right now, imagine this area being devoid of anything, even monsters, and we're just left with the silence as we try to find Laura. Instead, I'm interrupted every 1 to 2 minutes with a monster I fought countless times chasing me down. It honestly reminds me of Final Fantasy 15 and how it handled its nighttime world. Everything made you want to never explore when the sun went down because it was more cumbersome than fun. Because God forbid you wanted to do a beautiful nighttime drive with the bros and maybe hold hands, but you couldn't, as it would turn into 2 seconds of moving forward just to then get attacked by a giant. But I wouldn't say in Silent Hills 2's case, it's not worth at least checking around, as you will come across secrets only findable in this version of said town. My favorite being one of the rooms in the hotel. Now I know I didn't mention this, but there's a moment where James says this specific room at the hotel feels wrong and that they shouldn't be here. Well, upon coming back to check it out, you can find this symbol on the wall. It can be seen in a few places throughout your journey, but this is one of the more notable ones. Now, this symbol specifically is the Halo of the Sun marking. It's more tied to Silent Hill 3 as it's representing the religious cult and is used as a save point for Heather in said game. Which another cool thing is this room is also tied to another story moment in Silent Hill 3, wrapping them both together in one cool little reference bow. In the grand scheme of things, it's not all that important, but it's the payoff to some dialogue that at first seemed like throwaway lines. Now, following the story path, if you head back to the bar with the jukebox, it's somehow still working and the neon lights coming from it fill the void in the room. And we can clearly see a message written above the wall that tells James, if you really want to see Mary, you should just die. But you might be heading to a different place than Mary, James. Reading this almost comes across as someone is here taunting us, with it only getting stranger when a public phone is ringing just for James to pick it up and no one answers. But surprisingly, there's a note by the phone that implies something or someone knows we're trying to find our wife, with whoever it is leaving a wrench behind to open up a locked gate. And let me just say right now, if you thought the areas before were walking hellholes, from this point on, these places will offer some of the toughest fights and experiences yet. We now use the wrench to open up the lock, and all that greets us is an open tunnel and a void below as far as our eyes can see. We're truly going deeper than ever. When heading inside, it just appears to be a long dark hallway with gated floors, till a sound can be heard, with it becoming louder and louder with each second, as we finally get to meet our newest threat. But I'll wait to talk about them later, since for now, all you can really see is their mouth hands, which cool enough, you can shoot them and watch them fall to their deaths. It's kind of hard to pull off though, since you need to shoot enough shots into each mouth before they can grab back on, as they'll re-grab if you're not fast enough. I wouldn't be surprised if most players didn't know this was a thing, as you really don't have any reason to do this since they can easily be avoided by running past them. Finally, we made our way to Rosewater Park, since the note from earlier said something was here to find. In the remake, they added a whole new scene with Angela where she confides in you about her mom not being here, with her emotions this time around seeming to be even worse than before, as clearly we can notice she switches demeanor from any little thing James says. Things get bad, however, when he brings up how he's trying to find a little girl. Now, there's two perspectives on what people think she's referring to when she says how you shouldn't be here. One being the fact that Angela thinks James is after Laura for dubious reasons. With Angela being a survivor of said abuse, she freaks out thinking that's what James has planned. The other is her dad actually shows up and is behind the player. And if you were to enhance the audio for this moment in particular, something can be heard approaching. It's still up in the air what perspective you should have for this, but I also think both work just fine, as either outcome would fit well with Angela's role in this town. If it is her dad, then this is added here to probably foreshadow what's soon to come. But if you ask me, I lean more on the idea that it's just Angela freaking out about James wanting to find Laura, because he's a grown adult looking for a little girl, causing her to dial back into her delusional thoughts and feed into said trauma, which results in her lashing out. The reason why I think this is because if the dad idea was supposed to be the case, I feel they wouldn't have made it where it's only heard if you actively try to find it. So it could just be one of the 100 countless audio secrets that plague the game. All in all, props to Blooper for adding this, since it could have still worked just as well if James came here and dug up the key from behind the statue, like you do in the PS2 version, but the fact they wanted to give more interaction between James and Angela while not making it feel out of place, it's a testament to their understanding of these new portrayals they wanted to showcase, as it's probably a lot easier to make the writing flow well when you have a base to work with. But with this scene, there's no previous thing to look back on for guidance, meaning the writers really had to make dialogue that felt believable and still worked with the previous style. Now, upon grabbing the key, it's time to head to the building that Maria actually mentions to you if you walk by it. The Historical Society. Inside this dusty old structure, we can see a lot of cool paintings and pictures from the olden days of this very land, with James seeming to have a reaction specifically to this painting that features Pyramid Head and what looks to be bodies inside cages. Now, I know I talked about this painting before, but I wanted to add that this seems to make the tie between Pyramid Head and Flesh Lips appear to be way closer than previously thought. Now, if you're playing on New Game Plus, you can come across an item needed for the rebirth ending, which means we're now one item away from acquiring this. Now, it won't take long for you to find out where you need to go, with the only way forward being this long dark staircase, seeming to go on for miles down to the dark depths below. It's time to start the dive into darkness. Now, one thing I feel both the original and the remake nail is just how nothing really comes from this. In most horror titles, you know some monster is waiting down at the depths for you, ready to jump out and scream. The music sounding like a weird distorted call from something far away echoes, almost as if it's coming from the bottom of the stairs. But the more you walk, the volume of the cry never changes. Your worries fill your mind as you can only theorize what is truly waiting, to only then be greeted by a door and nothing else. With some players still assuming something is here waiting will just leave with the idea they were one of the lucky ones that didn't get caught, while others will feel a bit eerie for why nothing happened, as if the game itself was purposely toying with them. And this is truly the beauty of the unknown. Inside, we find more hallways that are cramped and rust-ridden, with the doors leading us to another hole James has to jump inside, always seeming to never be injured after the fall no matter how long the drop is. Now, I know I mentioned this before, but again, these holes that you dive into or reach inside are supposed to represent James's carelessness for himself, which again explains why he, without any real hesitation, just jumps inside or digs around in these spots that most of us, I hope, would shy away from faster than an anime fan on prom night. But when you live your life with no care for your own, the end reward outweighs any risk involved. He's so destined to reach the goal he's after, a finger being degloved, knees being broken, arms being sliced, are just part of the risk he's willing to take. We finally reach what appears to be a cafeteria, with a body shot dead, with our flashlight slowly revealing Eddie in the corner. He says how this man was staring at him, making Eddie feel like he was being mocked and he just couldn't let that happen. James, confused upon hearing Eddie's story, tells him you can't just kill someone for looking at you, with the camera then panning over to Eddie, and right here, something seems to snap. He stays silent for a bit just to break it with a laugh as he tells James how the man was dead before he got here anyways. He then tries to head off, so we ask him if he's really going out by himself, and all Eddie says is, yeah. But it seems to have a very different demeanor than we've seen him with before. Now we can check out the body that was shot, and it doesn't take a I Spy champion to realize, yeah, this is James. This is probably where most players come to learn that all the bodies we've been seeing throughout Silent Hill are just him. This is said to add to the theory that every time you die in your playthrough, this is another body left behind for the next James to try his luck at the time loop. It's why people assume these notes here explaining things about the creatures that no one else should be able to see are findable to begin with, as some will directly tell you, the player, how to defend yourself against the monsters, and other writing targeted at James in particular, as only he himself from a previous loop would have the knowledge of said events for him to write about it, but this is a theory that has never been confirmed. Now, it was believed that the random photos you can find scattered around the world had the answer to this theory being canon or not, because on the back, there's these letters you can find. When these letters are encrypted, you'll learn it states, "You've been here for 20 years. Letting some believe this was referring to how long James has been stuck in the loop. But it also could just be a play on the time between the original and the remake release of Silent Hill 2, which has been around for 20 years. Now, there are a few things that do go against this theory, as well as like how James never remembers anything after dying apparently, but somehow knows to leave notes for the next James. But for the most part, I do at least accept this as canon. Welcome to the next area, the Toluca Prison. On the PS2, this place is pretty simple and straight to the point. Even the puzzles are way quicker with less things to find. I can only really picture one time where the solution to a puzzle got cryptic, with you needing to pick up 3 items, a horseshoe, a wax doll, and a lighter. The only reason why I figured out this solution is because it was the only combinable items I had, so I just tried it. And somehow melting said doll and using the horseshoe as a handle lets you pull up the opening in the floor. It's a really creative puzzle, but I legit would have never in a million years thought to do that from looking at the 3 items alone. But when we gaze upon the prison in the remake, this is massively expanded in puzzle and explorable areas, for both the better and the worst. Let's start with the better. I really love the newest room where you can find a chapel for the prison with the confession rooms and all. Strangely, I'm surprised this wasn't added to the hospital, since again, the Brookhaven Hospital in the remake is inspired by the Yorktown Memorial Hospital, and that one does have a chapel inside the building. It makes me wonder if they decided to bring that idea over to this area instead, because it doesn't appear in the original either. But this chapel alone already gets my mind racing more about how the prison life was here. I also find having the monsters locked away for the most part in the cages to be such a cool detail that comes into play later. In a way, seeing them stuck there as they seem to accept their fate and don't even try to bother with you, it helps create a sense of safeness. It also means when you do have to get inside the cages, you're more often only going to be dealing with one monster at a time, so there's no real worry of being double teamed. My favorite moment of seeing a monster trapped is when you come to this door and peer inside, with it showing us the beautiful lady standing there. The reason why I love this is because if you aim through the peek hole, you can shoot the monster and injure it. Like the fact I'm able to affect it in some form when, as far as I can remember, I never found a way inside this specific door, just makes me love all the hidden things you can find in this game. Now, it won't take long to discover the first floor isn't the only part of the prison, as there's also a basement and a second floor. I find the upper area, while a bit tedious to navigate around since it's full of the mannequins that can now crawl on the walls like spiders, being able to look down below and having any verticality to use as a way to explore around the prison is just a nice addition. And I feel it helps make the once flat rectangular map from the PS2 come across like a more realistic view of what a gigantic prison would be. But every time I come here, I end up wondering, if Silent Hill is a small town, why is the prison nearby so utterly massive? It doesn't take long, however, to come across this section where you cause a power outage to get inside a room to find this weight. The sound that plays here when the power stops and the alarm kicks in makes you realize how fucked you probably are, as the power grid was the only thing keeping the enemies locked inside their cells. And when I said monsters are a threat in groups, it's because of this moment here. Going out into the hallway to only see the red alarms flashing as all of these guys greet you, it's truly the stuff of nightmares. The prison, I feel, actually nails a good balance between exploring and having a lot of combat, because said combat encounters come from your actions needed to solve the puzzles, making them both work together instead of feeling like they're on separate wavelengths. And the atmosphere this builds makes me see all these monsters in the hallway and not think, oh god, I hate having to fight every 10 seconds, like it was in the apartment or hospital. But instead, I think, oh shit, this is actually horrifying and feels on par with the original and horror these monsters can create, with the reward for clearing all these threats being the strongest gun in the game, the rifle. Unlike the shotgun, I can actually hit shit even if I'm up close to the target, which is insane since rifles are more designed for long range action. Which I just realized I never mentioned the shotgun, so I'll go ahead and do that real quick here. It's good, but it seems to have a very weird glitch where it ends up missing things when they're right in front of you. I don't know why, but a couple of times I would shoot the shotgun off and then it would literally go right past the enemy and then I would get hit. And it only seems to be the case when they're right up against you, which is very weird because the shotgun should be designed better in that scenario, but apparently it goes right past them. So I don't know where the hurt box or hitbox starts at for the shotgun, but it seems to be slightly in front of James past a certain point that you can end up missing if the enemy is too close. So that's all I really have to say about the shotgun. The rifle honestly is way better. Now going to the very end of the hallway, you will find one of the more notable rooms inside this dungeon. That being this dark area that appears to be outside with the only sound that can be heard coming off like the sound of galloping horses. While this room is pretty much the same in both versions, the puzzles are way different. On the PS2, you gotta get these 3 square tablets. In the remake, you're tasked with finding weights scattered across the prison, and by using these, it will unlock specific animal doors, which will grant you access to other parts of the prison like the basement area and the second floor to find even more weights. I really don't think I like this version of said puzzle all that much because it really can feel like trial and error trying to make sure the weights are correctly on each side. Even when I do get a door open, my reward is usually a bunch of enemies to find a single weight and then repeat. It really makes this whole area, in my opinion, while it does have really cool moments, it just weighs my patience down with the pun intended, as you're basically asking me to do the same puzzle idea 4 times. When you finally clear all the doors and come back to the room, you can now see it's raining. But thanks to the final weight that we got, we can now make the line be straight down the middle, allowing the statue to drop a handle, granting us access to another puzzle that I, for the longest time, thought it was something you couldn't fail till my friend told me he did fail it. So thanks to him for that. Here we have tiles with things written on them describing the murders and crimes committed by 6 people. You're supposed to line up each word tile with the one that seems to match. Strangely, this was moved to be here instead of later on in the original, having you figure out from the 6 people that were hanged who the innocent person was. I legit have no real idea how you're supposed to come to this conclusion, and what I assume the game actually wanted me to do was pull each rope in a certain order. Even a chat member suggested this to me and we both were wrong, but in the remake you do no such thing. Instead, you pull on the noose and fall into a hole. You still have to find out who the innocent person is by lining each tablet together with the right one, and somehow I always ended up doing it every time and never failed this, so I still couldn't tell you how to actually get the solution. But once you fall down into the hole, it will have us appearing in a room that leads us to 2 doors that open up to another even bigger hole that James jumps inside of. And you won't guess what this leads to. Yeah, another fucking hole. While giving me the same vibes of Fragile Dream's 6 different ladders back to back, this is done to show James plummet into the town as we go deeper and deeper with each jump, with it all leading to an elevator that goes even further into the depths. As James continues to go deeper down into the town's clutches, you can really feel a sense of turning back no longer being an option. Now, here's probably one of, if not my top 5 favorite bosses in all of gaming, as we finally are going to be facing the one and only Abstract Daddy. Now on the PS2, he's pretty much a whatever fight. You see him, shoot him, and he die. That's it. Weirdly enough, this boss comes back as an enemy you encounter on the PS2, and I'm really glad the remake didn't do that, as that would have killed everything this fight sets up for the player. Now, I want to believe the reason why they brought it back to being a common enemy in the original is because Angela still happens to be nearby where you're at, showing that she's still easily giving into her delusions, making it where the Abstract Daddy never dies. But either way, I just found it to be a bit weird to use said boss in that context. But when we run into Angela, it doesn't take long for us to be attacked by what is basically her dad, with this being one of the few examples where James and other characters Silent Hills mixed together. It's also said what James is seeing doesn't match 100% to what Angela is witnessing, as this boss, while technically her monster, will still form into things that match James's fears and regrets, as even Ito stated that we don't know what her Abstract Daddy really looks like and probably never will. But what we can see doesn't make it any less horrifying. The biggest design choice for this boss is the 2 corpses with one on top of the other strapped to a hospital bed. But under the bed, 2 arms and legs can be seen, allowing it to still walk around and grab James. While it looks very slow and heavy, it's able to make very quick dashes towards the player, even if only in a straight line. It can also scream really loud, which will cause James to freeze in place, just like how the flesh slip did before. The look of it and the way it can affect James by sound can help us see how both parties' regrets and fears have formed together. The 2 corpses in such a way are to help showcase the sexual abuse Angela faced, as one is obviously on top overpowering the other, while still helping come back to James's sexual regrets, and the corpses also being strapped to the bed brings back the idea of James's feelings of being trapped and guilty from Mary's sickness. As to why it's able to scream and cause James to freeze, carries over to the same reason flesh slip can cause the same reaction. But besides that, the boss itself isn't really the main focus for why this is my favorite. Technically, he's pretty easy. I don't think you should ever die to him, as his main way of attacking is basically grab or dash. But Blooper truly made something not only so disturbing and downright sickening, but made it somehow artistically beautiful. With each shot and more pain inflicted to the boss, it will begin to start teleporting us to different hallways. As we walk, clips of a man yelling at someone can be heard, as it's believed to be Angela's dad and the things he said to her. The majority of the time it is very distorted, but there does exist a full clear version of what her dad yelled at her, with it being quite hard to listen to, so it does make sense why they probably scrapped the full audio from playing. It's crazy to see how they were able to make it feel like we're experiencing the same pain and walking through the familiar halls where such awful things were done to her, with the saddest room of all being what most presumed to be Angela's closet, with this specific room showing no real damage or decay like the other walls around, with the only real notable thing inside being a stuffed bear. This is probably where Angela would have hidden to avoid her brother and father. And if this doesn't make you feel just so much dread and sorrow, it only gets worse from here. The more damage and shots thrown at the demon, the more and more distorted the area gets, as audio of her dad talking continues to echo around us, and it all soon turns from smoke-stained hallways to flesh-pulsing rooms. Now, in the second update for the game, it seemed that these walls no longer pulse, but were soon added back in the update I'm on now. Most people believe this was changed for worries that seeing these pulsing walls was too graphic. But I'm gonna be real, I think the patch just messed something up and they just never checked here, as why remove something just to add it back in another patch later? And this was also still in version 1.0, so obviously it was supposed to be there no matter what. Like I said, I don't think they removed it on purpose, because if somehow this is too gruesome but finding a little girl's implied hiding spot from her family who assaulted her over and over isn't, then I don't know, man. It's just so insane how they managed to make a boss feel tied to the world around you, whereas he slowly gets weakened, his hold and the delusions also begin to fail. It's why it goes from normal hallways to gears and moving metal, as if we scratched the surface away and can now see the true moving parts to the mystery. With the last shot going through his skull, finally we watch him die, and seeing Angela go crazy attacking the boss, just to then turn to us and assume we're only after her for sex, and that we never cared about her wife, as she even begins to cry about how we're just going to force ourselves onto her. Even after James explains he just wants Mary, she taunts him, implying he never cared and probably found someone else, just to then have it all end on James saying one line.
Admit it. You didn't want her around anymore.
No.
You probably found someone else.
No.
I need to find my mama.
I never.
My God, this whole section has been some of the most wild emotions I've ever felt towards any game I've ever played. Again, Blooper fucking nailed this. I can't picture anything more beautifully crafted and a perfect example of how video games can be playable and artistic at the same time. Truly, whoever decided to turn a once pretty mad boss fight to a scene where it not only captures Silent Hill to a T and what I've expected from it, but somehow incorporating the negative feelings of dealing with sexual assault and PTSD trauma by said actions, then being able to show instead of blatantly tell us the feelings Angela has formed from the abuse, as clearly she feels trapped inside these broken down walls with your own abuser, just like how James is trapped in his own delusional walls because of his abuser being Mary. After beating the abstract daddy and walking through the dark hallways, we find none other than Maria. When James starts to question how she's even here, she questions about what he's even talking about, as if she doesn't remember. Then out of nowhere, Maria talks about a tape. Apparently, James left a VHS tape behind in the hotel, which is only something James would know about. James, upon hearing her say this, questions who she really is, if she's really Maria or Mary, with her replying, "I'll be whatever you want," as all that matters is she's here for James and is real to the touch, with her teasing words and gestures finding their way to James's ears, with her begging him to find a way to her in a seductive tone as she can't do anything behind these cell bars. James, taken aback by everything, tells her to wait there and he will go to her. And another cool detail, if you decide to enter the room again after leaving, Maria will start to hum the theme Promise, which is the song that plays here on the PS2. Now this leads us to the most annoying puzzle in the entire game, the spinning statue head. I really hate this shit, especially in the remake, as it's so long and tedious trying to find the right rooms and make sure you don't backtrack to the ones you've already gone to. Compare that to the PS2 version, it's super easy, and you only need to find one door. The only issue is it just lacks the real-time movement helping you know if you're doing it right or not. But I don't think either version is hard per se, but having to go to multiple rooms and always ending back here at the cube can only be done so many times before I wish it was handled more in line like it was on the PS2. That being said, one of the rooms it does lead us to is really cool, as it's covered with bugs and the monsters we saw before with their mouth hands climb around below. And trust me, I promise I'll mention these guys soon. I really find this area to be really creative and disturbing, as you not only have to dodge their attacks, but figure out where to go at the same time. With another cool secret you come across, like this random office desk that even James questions why it's here. With it believed, this is symbolizing what James does for a living, as it's never explained anywhere at all what the purpose is in game. But besides this random area, everything here looks the same and feels like I'm retracing the same steps I did at the first apartment. If it wasn't for the fact Pyramid Head can be found down here and can and will kill you, I don't think there's much here that I would remember. Even after my second playthrough and writing this right now, I can barely recall any moments during this part besides how annoying it is to use the face cube. That's it. After clearing all the rooms, this section ends with a chase as Pyramid Head comes out of nowhere and begins coming after me. With nowhere else to go besides towards a wall of hands, you try your best to flee. Luckily, the hands seem to retract back into the wall as Pyramid Head approaches, giving James a way to not get killed. Once past the hands, a loud sound is heard and causes James to wince in pain, but it seems like now we made it to the end and came across the door to Maria, who's passed away again. This time, her body resembles more of what Mary looked like on her deathbed. Outside the door, you can actually come across Pyramid Head's sword, which is a usable weapon in the PS2 version and basically can one-shot everything. But in the remake, it's not something you can swing around at monsters or keep with you, as its only purpose is to allow the player to make it through the wall of hands. But I mean, it would be pretty weird and ruin the tone of everything if I actively walked around like this everywhere I went holding a giant butter knife. The path will soon lead us to a place that has a bunch of graves scattered around, with one being open for us to jump inside again, as if James himself is jumping feet first into his own grave. Now it's time for another boss fight, with the one and only Eddie. Now, I'll spoil this right now, the remake does a way better job at making Eddie feel like a threat, as he had a really bad problem in the OG game of getting stun locked. But to see how Eddie is portrayed here, where he goes from a weak, spineless man who's made to appear as useless as possible, to finally getting a small taste of some sort of power and decides killing people is how he will prove that he's not to be messed with. With his speech about how even if he's a fat, worthless pig, who cares when you're dead as a corpse can't laugh, he then proceeds to shoot the corpse nearby 3 times, as he taunts us about how he knows we've been laughing at him and that we won't continue to think he's useless. Eddie then raises the gun to point it at James, just for him to react quickly and punch him down to the ground. This moment, the camera shows a shot from Eddie's level as it looks up to James. We can see here his voice goes back to that soft, unthreatening tone, which is a drastic change from how he was 5 seconds ago. As the gun that gave him all that power and somehow he was still able to be knocked on his ass, he realizes that he can't beat James. Eddie then starts to tell James no matter what, we're basically the same, how this town called us both here, so no point in James pretending he's higher and mightier than him. Eddie then grabs the gun again and runs inside the room behind him. This is Eddie's one last chance to take the power back and put a stop to you, as to him, you're just like all the bullies who laughed at him. Now, Eddie, to me, I can heavily relate to the fact of being bullied nonstop for how I looked, my dog dying, and anything you can think of. He's a nice representation of someone who's been bullied all their life and became fed up with it and decided to take matters into their own hands. The problem is how he went about dealing with said bullies. You see, for me growing up, I was bullied so much that I would usually rather be in ISS because it meant I wouldn't be around people anymore to be antagonized. It came to a point after countless times of telling teachers, family members, and anyone that would listen hoping it would get better, just to realize it never did. I even stopped going to the school counselor because he straight up told me that I come in here too much and I should just change the things they're bullying me about until I could to not come back. This was during the time as well my own dog was run over, and that's what they were mocking me about. So throughout my life, I realized I had two choices how I wanted to go at dealing with my situation. I could either be like Eddie and hurt and retaliate with anger and violence to put fear and become nothing more than the very thing Eddie is trying to destroy, or I don't feed into said violence and revenge and instead do something just as dumb. I decided that I would just let them beat the shit out of me and say whatever they wanted. Because the teachers never helped and some of them would even get in on the bullying, not just towards me, but other kids as well. It was ingrained in my mind at that point, it's just something I have to accept. Looking back on it, I do think this also wasn't a good way to handle it either, and why I had and still have some trauma from it all. I can at least say I know why I went at it this way though. You see, I picked this option out of fear, mostly from the fear I would be grounded and then just be miserable at home doing nothing, while feeling the same at school. Considering I was basically grounded most of my childhood anyways because no one in my household ever thought to sit down and talk with me and would just see I got a referral, so guess I'm grounded for another week. It didn't even really matter what the referral was. So when I would get bullied, I felt if I just let them do what they wanted and stayed quiet, it usually meant I wouldn't get written up, most of the time at least. I don't know how many times people just said I did something and it was believed I did because it was me versus them. One of those moments being that I pulled a fire alarm while somehow changing at the same time while not even being near one. Makes me fucking wish I did pull it, as that's always been a dumb kid dream of mine, like in those movies, but yeah. However, if I could turn back time, I think I would have found something more in the middle where I wouldn't have let people walk all over me, but I wouldn't hurt for the sake of retaliating either, as I do feel there is a middle ground to dealing with this, but I also do believe it takes a lot more outside help than what I, as a small child, could have ever done for myself. So to see Eddie and hear what he's talking about, I can relate to the pain and trauma of being bullied to this extent, but to see him choose violence as a way to get the power back he desperately wants to have is something that in real life has created some of the worst monsters who have done terrible things that aren't forgivable, which is why I find Eddie to be a well-written character to showcase how awful going down the path he picked is. Upon chasing Eddie into the room, we finally learned what he did and why he ran away. Turns out he shot the man who was bullying him in the leg and killed the guy's dog, with him now wanting to do the same to us. Now, I know chat loved joking about me being Eddie because we're both big guys, but first off, that's a horrible insult, and I think you guys should really watch what you say, as me and Eddie are nothing alike, because Eddie can actually run for more than 5 seconds. Yeah, despite this guy being a big man, he's fast and nimble. In fact, I think this is one of the hardest fights in the whole game because of how much he moves around, and his gunshots do so much damage. But there's also another reason why this fight is incredibly difficult, and it's such a neat detail I don't think you would have really noticed your first time playing. Now, while James is able to kill these horrifying creatures we come across, I believe he's able to do this because at the end of the day, none of these things look human. But here is someone who is a human trying to attack us, and now we have to fight back. The anxiety and dread James is probably facing is never told to us in any way, but it's sure shown. If at any point you aim with your gun in this fight, you can clearly see your reticle is very, very off. Like, here's a side-by-side comparison. James can't even hold the gun steady anymore, as if his own hands are shaking. And this is done intentionally, as after you kill Eddie, we can clearly see his hands are indeed shaking, as James now has to face reality that he killed a person, a real, living, breathing human. This is why I feel the Eddie fight is another good strong moment in the game, and it really helps us see how these two people are both diving into the delusions and insanity this town is creating around them. And it does help that the fight is challenging and requires you to use the meat carcasses to protect you from being shot. It's able to incorporate the environment and gameplay feel into a full-fledged fight, and it does it so well. I'm just in awe how much Blooper every time finds a way to make these fights feel way more engaging. Well, we're now on to the final stretch, as all that awaits us is a boat ride to the final place, where James will finally discover the truth. Getting on the boat to sail across the lake in front of us as fog covers everything as far as the eyes can see, with the only real path to guide us being the light in the distance. You can freely explore around if you want, and will even be rewarded with a trophy for spending a certain amount of time on the lake, but for the most part there's really not much out there. I will be real though, in both games the boat controls are really bad, but not like it's gonna ruin the experience for me just because a one-time gimmick doesn't feel fleshed out. What do I look like, DSP? Oh hey, the camera's been on. Camera's been on this whole time. After what feels like ages, we finally arrive at the hotel where Mary and James stayed at 3 years ago. As for a dungeon, I really liked it, mostly for the fact that the key we need to unlock the room Mary and James stayed at is one of the first things you come across as soon as you enter. However, you can't use it till the end, helping make the player get excited and theory craft what is waiting beyond the door. You have to spend the whole time here wandering, as all you can do is keep working door by door, room by room, till the third floor finally unlocks for you. Even without this being the case, there's still a lot of cool secrets to come across, and being able to open up paths for shortcuts gives you a rewarding feeling as the hotel is quite big. Even on my second playthrough, I found myself actually getting a bit lost at times. Now, one cool thing I really like that the PS2 version pulls is making areas in the hotel too dark to read or be able to see your items like your map. But because you don't have a light source always on you now, you have to use the lamps to see what you're looking at, with it even having a whole puzzle around making it where James lights an area enough to see the keyhole for a door, as it was originally too dark. It's not huge or game breaking by any means, but I just found it really cool to play around with something as simple as if you have a flashlight on or not. Since at this point in time we've been so accustomed to having one, it makes the player have to step out of your comfort zone and work with the limitations at hand. That being said, while most puzzles are a bit different in some aspects, the trek is pretty much the same, besides a mini boss that appears and a few added puzzles in the remake, like this one where you see a book on top of a glass panel and have to shoot it so it can land on the floor below. I wish though if you already knew about the book being there, you could shoot it early and have it drop to the floor below, but sadly the devs seem to only make the book appear if you're up here. But I really think why I found the hotel to be a lot more enjoyable than the other places is how pretty much everything needed to solve whatever you come across can be seen at the very start, from the fish with the light bulb, the keys I mentioned before, and the other things like that. It's the devs going, hey, here's all the pieces, but good luck getting to them, instead of me doing a task with the hope the pieces I need will reveal themselves. Now this is where the abstract daddies actually would appear as common enemies, and it really takes a lot for them to attack you. Like either they're just not programmed well to react to James, or they are trying their best to not attack. In the remake, however, we have our own mini boss, with it being the mouth hand monsters from before. They also show up later on where you do a puzzle without having any of your equipment, so it's pretty cool. The name of this creature is the Mandarin. Normally when we see them, they're always hanging above a giant pit, desperately trying to hold themselves up, and will always be aggressive towards James, actively following him and using their long tongues to pierce your body, with their screams immobilizing you before you can get away. But here we can see they also use their hands to move around like legs. The prominent feature about them is their 3 mouths, as the face resembles something akin to a megaphone while the gigantic arms look like punching bags. Now for me, any design where it looks like they have big sleeves is an instant favorite in my book. Now, of course, these still have the same tropes of being representative of Mary, and it's why they appear to be in mental hospital attire, but the reason why they're always hanging above giant pits is to help push the feeling of James wanting to escape and how no matter what, he feels trapped in a situation that doesn't seem to have a way out. Ito said the reason why they got their name actually came due to the part their look resembles the Chinese symbol for Mandarin, with their signature mouth for both this and the flesh lip being pulled from a painting called the second version of Triptych 1944. This design, however, was reworked for Silent Hill 3, as the enemy, the Closers, look almost identical to our pal Mandarin. This occurred because Ito felt most players overlooked this lovable creature, especially since you only ever saw it under a bunch of mesh gates. Overall, again, my favorite monster out of everything in this game. But now I think it's time to finally finish up the story for Silent Hill 2. It's not long after arriving where you will run into Laura, as this time around she's not interested in locking you in a dark room. She actually wants James to help her find Mary, since that's why she came here. Laura said Mary gave her a letter that was meant to let her know she had passed away, but Laura, being a little girl, just assumed when she said she was leaving, she meant she would be here, with her letting James read the letter as he learns that she and Mary both share the same nurse in their time of being at the hospital. One big thing written inside the letter is Mary telling Laura, "Happy 8th birthday." James then begins to look over at Laura and ask, how old is she right now? With her response being, She turned 8 last week. But that doesn't make any sense. If Mary died 3 years ago, how can this letter say happy 8th birthday? Giving James hope that Mary may actually be alive and is here. This is when we get told that there's actually a second letter that was meant for James in particular, but it seemed Laura at some point lost it because when she hands us an envelope with it inside, it's nowhere to be found. This causes her to go off and try to find it. Now, we won't see Laura till after we visit the room 312, but we still have a few things we need to pick up, like the last item needed for the rebirth ending. And we also acquired a while back the drink needed for the In Bliss ending after opening the small wooden box. And we got the other 2 key parts to create the needed dogbone key for that specific ending. So once we get to the section where I'll cover all the endings, I'll go into more detail about them there. But for now, it's time to go and visit the room where James and Mary stayed in. Inside at first, there's really not much going on, just looks like your everyday basic room. But after picking up the tape from the Lost and Found, we can see a VCR right there on the floor. And all that's left to do is insert the tape inside, with it soon showing us a recording of James and Mary. At first seeming happy as Mary gushes about how much she loves it here and hopes James will take her back someday. But then out of nowhere, it takes a dark twist, as what is on the tape is something that James or the player aren't ready for.
Promise you'll take me again, James.
So yeah, James killed his wife. He smothered her with a pillow and put her in the back of his car. Now you may be asking, how could James have killed her but she died 3 years ago? Well, for one, Mary didn't die 3 years ago. In fact, if anything, she's only been dead for a week at most. The reason why James mentioned she died 3 years ago is because that's when Mary got sick. And in James's mind, the wife he knew and loved disappeared 3 years ago, as he says in his own words, when that damn disease took her. Now for why James seems to have no memory of this is done from the guilt he holds from doing said deed. It's not that he doesn't remember, his self-conscience simply won't allow the memory to manifest. It's why James feels guilt, acts careless, and is still here in the first place. Because all James wants more than anything in the world is the one person he loved dearly with all his heart that is now gone by his own doing. This is when Laura finally comes to check on James and learns the truth he killed her, causing her to lash out at him before leaving, really leaving James all alone. But a radio broadcast comes through as Mary can be heard on the other end telling him to keep going, and he's almost there. And so, with nothing left, we push on forward. I want to stop real quick to finally talk about James as a protagonist. He's probably one of the most well-written characters I've seen in a long time. To have someone be so loved even after straight up murdering his wife, and somehow this action leads to countless discussions if James really did the right thing or not. Does killing his own wife become justifiable for the mistreatment she brought onto him? Now, while I don't agree with killing your wife, I can 100% see why he did it and how James is truly filled with guilt for the actions he brought. To write a main protag that you, the player, are supposed to spend a whole game with and have him do something so irredeemable and heinous, and you're tasked with still having the player like him, is something that most people will never be able to do. The fact we spent so long with James, learned a little ins and out of his character, experienced what he saw and came to an idea of what he's supposed to be, just for all that to get slapped right out of existence. Because this whole time, we weren't playing as a man who loved his wife, we were playing as a man who murdered her. As James and the player were being shown a lie. James is a monster. He's no better than Eddie, killing for the fact of finding a way to take the power back he once lost, as James wanted desperately to have his life he once had back. As the power of maintaining and keeping things how they used to be was fading, both him and Mary became scared and lost. It's why there's a moment where we walk through a hallway and we get to hear a conversation between him and Mary, or in the remake, just Mary, as they removed the one talking part James had in this scene. But we can see how Mary lashes out demanding he leaves, not wanting his damn flowers anymore, to then cry out for him to come back, and to not leave her all alone. Watching her emotions ping-pong around back and forth to show not only is James hurting, but she is as well. At the end of the day, you need to remember Mary was dying. That's why she lashed out. I'm pretty sure most people in her shoes who are being told they're dying and seeing your body that once worked and was full of health slowly deteriorate to the point you can't even walk anymore. It makes sense why she lashes out. But getting to witness this conversation and how the love of his life is speaking towards him, I think it's really when James realized the marriage he once had is gone. Any power he had of keeping the chains of love tied together have rotted away, just like the soft skin he would probably kiss every morning and night of the one he called his Mary. And if this isn't one of the most downright depressive love stories I've ever seen, then I don't know what else is, man. Finally, down in the basement, you will find a bright glowing door, and when you open it, the scene is full of fire. We can even notice that there's a body attached to the wall, almost looking like the abstract daddy without the second corpse. Angela, upon seeing you, assumes you're her mom and comes over to you just to be disappointed. James starts to apologize to Angela but tells her that she's right, that the thing they both came to find isn't here. Angela then reveals something that was unexpected. She thanks us for helping her before, but mentions how she wishes we didn't. As she goes on to say, her own mother says she deserved the punishment. This is all said with the most monotone delivery and somehow the most comprehensive Angela has been all game. She's not switching from one emotion to another, not randomly fading back into her delusions. She's speaking calmly and direct. And it's because Angela finally knows the truth, that not only did her father and brother not give a shit about her, but so did her own mom. That's why when James tries to reassure her she didn't deserve what happened to her, she tells him not to pity her and that not even he would want to help her, as no one anymore can fix the trauma and pain she's developed from the abuse. This is when she tells James to give her back the knife, as it's obvious what she plans to do. But when James declines, she tells him he must be saving it for himself, but even if she did end her own life, nothing would change. As we see her start to head upstairs, James briefly mentions how it's hot as hell in here, hinting while he can't see the fire, he sure as hell feels it, but Angela just replies back,
You see it too? For me, it's always like this.
The monotone and blunt delivery really captures that all her anxiety and fears are gone, not because she overcame the trauma, but because she's accepted that her life isn't worth living and she deserves everything she got. These emotions, while tough to face, are what some people who dealt with sexual assault and abuse go through, especially when they tell someone just to hear back how they're either lying or get blamed for it happening. I know it's very easy for most people to look at SA survivors or abuse victims and go, why didn't you just report it when it happened? However, when you're in that situation, your usual people to report to half of the time aren't the most trustworthy to go to, as most SA cases usually occur from either family members or family friends, with the case for Angela being just that. That's why after learning the last person she felt would have her back and why she's here in the first place didn't actually care, it broke her and started to make her feed into the negative thoughts that she already had about the assault and how it was her fault. So to see Silent Hill, and this goes for both the remake and the original, handle the fall into despair from family abuse, it's one of the realest representations I've seen, but also one of the most heartbreaking ones. Now off topic, and to sorta, I guess, bring it to a lighter note, on the PS2, you can actually walk around here a bit and even watch Angela disappear up the stairs. And if you try to go up after her, you will get burned. And I kind of find it odd the remake decided to not let you explore in this room at all, as Bloopers seemed to make a bunch of other parts explorable, but it was probably done to make the moment feel more impactful, as I guess James walking up and burning himself on the fire would have been a bit anticlimactic. Now heading back out the door, one thing right away will stand out. You will end up running into 3 monsters, a lying figure, a bubblehead nurse, and a mannequin. But something is very off. The lying figure is laying on the ground as if it's in distress. The nurse walks towards you just to lose their balance and fall over. And the mannequin, it's actively running away from James, showing fear. When I first saw this, I actually thought something was wrong with my game, as I didn't really register what was going on. And well, like everything we've been facing, the delusions have been destroyed. James knows his wife is dead, so nothing can have an effect on him anymore. Because of that, the monster in the town itself no longer have power over him. It's why in the fight coming up, James talks about how he knows why he came here and why he needed to experience this town, with the PS2 version having a line that was removed where James said that he needed someone to punish him for his sins, but now James is ready to face reality and accept that Mary is truly gone. Before we head off to fight the last 2 bosses, you will notice the 9 save points here, with this being something I said I would talk about more when we got here. It's theorized these 9 save points resemble the 9 delusions James faces, as when you line up all the monsters James has fought, it's 9 of them total. However, there's something off about this save point, because when you go to save, it will appear differently, as James won't stare directly at the square like he did before. It's because James is now aware of the truth, so there's no need to reflect anymore, and only now can he face his guilt head on and go to the next room. This is when we're greeted with 2 pyramid heads and Maria, as she's upside down. Now I think it's finally time to talk about who the hell Maria is, since we've witnessed her die twice so far. So Maria isn't real. She's actually a part of James's delusions just as much as the other creatures. So in the greatest hits version of Silent Hill 2, a new story was added called Born from a Wish. It was supposed to show how Maria was created and what led her to coming across James, as her story is about Maria reflecting on why she exists and learning to deal with her loneliness. But at the end of the day, she's not real. It's actually why any time where another person could have interacted with her, she always stayed behind, like how she does for the bowling alley or movie theater. It's another reason why Pyramid Head doesn't fuck with her at all. As I said before, Pyramid Head's purpose is to destroy the delusions James has built and face the truth. Since Mary is a big part of said delusions, it's why she has to go. This is also why for a 3rd time we watch her die. For some reason, a few people I talked with didn't realize she's not supposed to be real, and is just James forming her into existence, but yeah, that's Maria. She's about as real as the idea of saying Planet Dob is actually a good game. Now before the fight, like I stated, James gives one of the hardest speeches about how he finally understands why the town called him here, what the delusions he faces represent, and that Mary is really gone. And with him finally understanding this, James says a 2-word phrase that is so badass that I get chills every time.
I'm ready.
Now, if the first boss fight with Pyramid Head wasn't cool enough, adding 2 that actively throw their spears at you where you barely dodge at the last second but feel the impact of it, while this all happens you're needing to juggle when you fire and move. This fight is so good. It's honestly crazy how well Blooper made every boss fight in the game be improved in every way possible. It's such a neat detail that the more damage you do to them, the rooms and walls break apart as a way to show James is tearing himself out of the delusions, just for it to finally end with both of the Pyramid Heads stabbing themselves with these same spears, as they've done their job and helped James face his guilt, so they're no longer needed. It's really pure peak writing, and I can't believe how good this is. Well, with the Maria model up above weirdly smiling at us, we have one more trek up to the final boss, as it's time to come face to face with Mary. Now, one thing I really like, depending on what ending you're getting, when you meet her, the dialogue will be different, with one of them outright having it actually be Maria pretending to be Mary. Stuff like this is so cool and really adds more to how the final ending presents itself. As for the fight, holy shit, I again do find the remake to be better, but both are good. Seeing Mary's body form into a mutated version of herself as the cage we've been seeing forms around her, with James now having to come face to face with killing his own wife all over again. In the remake, they actually added a whole new part where you're knocked down below, with Mary crawling across the top trying to surprise attack you. It's so cool trying to track her just like flesh slips and making sure to constantly move so you don't get blindsided. I do again love the final boss, and thematically, it's on par with a good bowl of spaghetti, but I just can't shake the fact that it comes across more as a harder flesh slip fight, as she basically does the exact same thing as other bosses. But finally, once you do enough damage, the final phase is here. Mary no longer is running, and is now in the aggression trying to take you out in every way she can, from dashing, slashing, and screaming. You and her are fighting just like 2 divorced parents who are swapping their kids in a Chuck E. Cheese parking lot. It's intense and spectacle all at the same time. But when enough shots go into Mary, she falls, as all that can be heard now is her pitiful cry of your name, as you look down at her, hearing her softly call to us. It's time to truly end this.
By the way, your cooch sucked.
Now it's time to cover the endings. This time around, I went for the rebirth ending where James ends up taking Mary and the 4 items he found along the way to have the old gods bring her back to life. But I was able to pick up 2 other endings, starting with the fan favorite where you take this bone key to unlock a door and have James come face to face with a Shiba Inu, as everything he's experiencing was caused by this dog. When it came to the 1.0 version of the remake, this ending was changed to having James scream in rage and go to attack the dog just for him to lose control of his body and have his model change to other characters in the game. No one is really sure why this got changed, but it can still be viewed in the pre-patch version. The other ending I got was in Bliss. This is a newly added ending for the remake, where James drinks this white liquid and it causes him to trip balls upon watching the VHS. Instead of going to the part where he kills Mary, it actually shows him realizing he's living inside the tape and he chooses to stay here and ignore what actually happened. The reason why it's called In Bliss is because ignorance is bliss. The endings, however, I didn't get are Maria and Water and Stillness, and finally UFO. The Maria ending has James pick her over Mary and ends up doing to repeat the same actions, as he hears Maria cough and tells her you should do something about that cough. So in Water, I actually got in the PS2 version, but in this, James, unable to truly forgive himself, ends up driving both him and Maria's body off a cliff into the water as he drowns. Stillness actually plays like the In Water ending, but instead of James driving off to die, Mary talks with him for a bit and tells him everything will be alright, with James asking her if she will wait for him, with Mary responding that she's always been waiting. The car does still drive off into the water, but it's heavily implied James got out and let her body sink into the lake along with his car. The UFO ending, it's something. James ends up running into Harry from Silent Hill 1 as a bunch of UFOs come from the sky. One alien ends up shocking James and they proceed to kidnap him. In the remake, Space James, which is his PS2 model, comes down and kidnaps him with the aliens, but instead of going back with James, he now goes to be with Mary. Yeah, this ending is crazy and somehow just has James getting cucked by himself. But with that leaves one left, and personally, it's my canon ending. Now, my first playthrough, I got the Leave ending, and out of the other ones you can achieve, I find this one to be the canon choice for me, as James can be seen talking with Mary in her hospital bed, as he expresses what he felt for the last 3 years. That he didn't want to see her suffer, but he also grew to hate her for how she lashed out, and that all he wanted was his life back. Mary then replies, if that's true, then why does he look so sad saying it? James finally gets handed the letter that Mary wrote to him, letting the delusions come to an end, as Mary finally passes on to the other side. We now get a shot of Laura drawing just for James to walk up and show her the letter. And that, my friends, was my Silent Hill 2 retrospective, and probably one of the longest videos I've ever made. Truly, I didn't expect this game to hit me as hard as it did. While I will say some parts didn't live up to the hype I created for myself, other parts really did. I think the reason why this hit so hard for me is because 3 years ago, I was supposed to get engaged, but it fell through. Because of that, I watched someone I loved dearly go from an amazing person I looked up to, having drive, charisma, and was overall, in my opinion, the most amazing girl on the planet, to a person that when I talked to, it's like I never even knew them. Every time she would come back into my life, I would slowly notice how she's a former husk of the person I loved, even if I was only able to come to that realization by her screwing me in some way every time we got back together. It was honestly very hard to deal with, especially since a lot of what I built for this channel in my life always included her in some way, and having to spend the last 3 years learning to find myself again has been rough. It's kind of why I haven't wanted to date anymore, because I just feel too much hurt from everything. But the reason why I'm bringing this up isn't to bash her, but to say that finding a game like Silent Hill 2, I finally felt something that spoke to me, showed me the same thoughts and emotions I felt watching someone I loved completely go downhill. That the thing you both built from the ground up is reaching the point where it's unrecognizable from what you thought it would be. And seeing that in Silent Hill 2 really hit hard. It's why I feel the Leave ending is so impactful to me, as we watch James finally come to terms with everything and accept it's over, that he needs to move on. For me, at one point, I did wish things would go back to normal, and that person would finally get their shit together and not just come back to my life because they knew if they sweet talked me enough, I'll help. And it was because seeing them on the path of ruin hurt me way more than anything. But now though, I would much rather move forward. I've spent enough time being alone to realize that I don't need someone in my life anymore, as I myself can find my happiness and just look back at the times and remember the good that did come from it. But one thing I learned is that living in the past and longing for it will always hinder your ability to see what's in front of you. And while the path through the fog may be scary, I think Silent Hill 2 shows you, if you push forward, you're bound to discover something. whether that be good or bad. At the end of the day, while James's loss of love was caused from killing his wife and isn't the same as mine, the fact I can feel represented by seeing this man feel the same way I did and go through all this trouble for the chance things could be what they were, it's why I fell in love with this game. It spoke to me and my emotions in a time where I've truly felt the most alone. Going 3 years and losing everything from your partners to your pets and things from the past, you know, shit really kicked my ass. To the point where many times I was ready to just say fuck it and paint the walls red. But at the end of the day, with therapy definitely helping, please do therapy if you can, I was able to push through and can now be here to talk about a game that I enjoy. And while to some, you know, maybe that's lame, I don't know. To me, it's really all that I could ask for. Man, I'm kind of glad that I don't have a lot of subscribers because I feel I wouldn't be able to get all deep like this since I basically just expect no one ever watch these till the end anyways, but yeah. Well, happy Halloween everyone. And I hope you all enjoyed my Silent Hill 2 retrospective. And we still have 4 more videos left to go, so see you guys next Friday. Goodbye.